live.
Just to introduce Leonie, she's my colleague who will be assisting me with turning your microphones on and off if you've forgotten to. If you're not speaking, have your microphone muted, and then when you speak, obviously we'll unmute you. So Mrs. Eastwood, yeah, thank you, that's kind. And then obviously we'll, when you speak, you can have it back on again. Right, so.
Yeah, we're live now.
Thank you. Can I welcome everyone to the Planning Application Committee on Thursday, the 8th of October? And can I ask our committee officer, Jackie Rogers, to read out the core virus rules that we have to apply to this meeting? Thank you.
Members, this is to remind you, members of the public and anybody with applications, that this meeting is being held in accordance with local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authorities and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales, Regulations 2020. And as such, all decisions made by the committee will be valid. The meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel, and the minutes will be being recorded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the agenda. And the first one on the agenda is declarations of interest. Anyone?
Chair, apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Huntley. Okay,
thank you for that. Missed that one. Judith, did you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest on the first application, Bartram Mowers Limited, Bluebell Road. I originally put in an objection and so would like today to speak to that objection and to take no part in the decision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lovick. Any other councillors? See no one interested. Okay, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Do we agree they're a correct record for people who are here? Thank you, Sandra. Move on to planning applications, and the first one is 4A, and it's Bartram Mowers Limited, Bluebell Road. And I'll ask Tracy, I think, is going to take us through this application. Tracy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just move to the presentation, so I'll just share my screen, so just bear with me. Okay, let's move to the first slide. So the application relates to land on Bluebell Road in Eton. The red line plan identifies the land that the application relates. We've got Bluebell Road to the east of the site, Newmarket Road A11 to the south. The land form parts of an area of land allocated for housing, specifically for over 55s, in the adopted site allocations plan, and is subject to policy R42. This plan is an extract from the site allocations local plan. The allocation policy identifies land around the land allocated for housing. This land all forms part of the Yare Valley character area, and policy R42 requires development to improve the green infrastructure of the Yare Valley corridor, improve pedestrian and cycle access to that land, and to provide public open space. Part of this allocation has already been developed. Phase 1 development extends across the southern sector of the site, Bluebell Road, Newmarket Road to the south. The application relates to the central portion of the land allocated, so there would be a remaining area of land which presumably will come forward as phase 3. So moving to some photographs of the site. The site is owned by Bartram Mowers. This photograph is taken from Bluebell Road of the existing site access. It's proposed to reconfigure this access, and this will perform the main vehicle access to the development. The site frontage is delineated by a belt of mature trees and hedgerow. You can see in the photograph here that there is an existing cycleway footway facility across the frontage of the site. This will retain priority across the new reconfigured site access. Moving to some photographs on the site. Within this photograph, you can see a former day nursery building, which operated previously from the site. And there are a number of agricultural greenhouses still located across the site. This photograph again is taken within the site, looking southwards towards what is phase 1 development. Phase 1 development comprised 3 blocks of apartments. You have 2 visible in the photograph here. Corrali Court, which comprises retirement apartments. Daisy Hill Court, which consists of assisted living extra care apartments. And out of view here is the 3rd block, Leander Court, which is a block of 20 flats managed by Norwich Housing Society as affordable dwellings. Just got a couple of photographs taken closer to that boundary between phase 1 and phase 2. So we have Corrali Court, Daisy Hill Court, and a closer photograph of Daisy Hill Court. I've got a couple of photographs just taken within phase 1 to just show the nature of development of that first phase. This is taken within the site, looking down the site access towards Bluebell Road. Corrali Court is visible in the left portion of the photograph. This is Leander Court, the block which wasn't visible previously. And Daisy Hill Court. As you can see, this block fronts a kind of access road parking area with a central avenue of trees. And you can see in the background of this photograph, where I've got the pointer, this is the application site. So this is proposed as phase 2 development. You can just see the roofs of the agricultural greenhouses that you saw photographs of earlier. So moving to the layout, just to get your orientation, we have Bluebell Road to the east. Phase 1 development is to the south. So we have that this block here shows the position of Daisy Hill Court. And you've got the kind of Yare Valley open space where I've got the pointer here to the west of this plan. So the scheme includes a total of 50 dwellings, 32 bungalows. Most of those are true bungalows, single-storey accommodation. There are 3 dormer bungalows, and I'll just point those out with my pointer. They're in there. 2 adjacent to where the open space is proposed, and then 1 more central within the site. And then a total of 18 apartments, 14 of those in a single block in the southwest sector of the site. I've got the cursor in that position now. This is the block that's been subject to most change since the application was first submitted. As first submitted, this block was for 18 apartments and was a Part 3, Part 4 story building. The amendment has reduced this to a 14 apartment building, and it is now entirely 3-story. Then there are 2 flats in a 2-story building in the position close to where the open space is proposed, and a further 2 flats in this building, another 2-story building, which is located towards the boundary with Bluebell Road. There's also a proposal for a residence pavilion building, and I'm pointing out the location of that now. And this building would have a kind of residence external courtyard, landscape courtyard to the front of it. So in terms of the layout, those dwellings are arranged around a series of cul-de-sacs and private drives. Most of the dwellings have on-plot parking or allocated on-street parking. There are a number of visitor spaces also proposed. These are located principally around the Pavilion building and along this kind of central spine road. There's a raised table on the approach to the access with Bluebell Road. This would slow traffic down as it approached the junction and the cycleway footpath crossover. Just moving to some views across the site. This is a kind of a CGI taken from Bluebell Road, looking across the site towards the River Yare. Bluebell Road is higher than the site. The levels fall away from Bluebell Road down towards the river. In the view here, you can see the two-storey flat building I referred to on the layout plan, and bungalows across the site. This building here, it's important to appreciate that this is the CGI submitted when the application was first submitted. When this apartment building was a 3-4-storey building, this is the building that has been amended. So this building is now entirely a 3-storey building, and so the ridge height, this 3-storey ridge height now carries through across the width of that block. This is a CGI taken kind of from the open space, showing the interface of phase 2 with the open space. Daisy Hill Court is located in this position. Again, the same situation in relation to this block. This is again as first submitted when the building was a 3- and 4-storey building. This upper storey has been removed, so the block is now 3 stories across its block width. So on this boundary, we have Daisy Hill Court visible there, the 3-storey block, 2-storey flats, 2 dormer bungalows, and a single-storey bungalow. Policy R42 requires development of this site to minimise impact on the landscape of the Yare Valley, and there is a requirement for a master plan for the site. This master plan was submitted when the first phase of development came forward as an application. This is an extract from that master plan document. It's quite a hefty document. But that considered design parameters for future development of the site and included consideration of building height, having regard to topography and changing levels. I think you can see on this placemaking plan, which formed part of that master plan, that this shows topographical information for the site. And you can see that there is a slope down from Bluebell Road, down across the site towards the river. And having regard to that topography, this plan identified scope for 1- and 2-storey buildings on the higher land towards Bluebell Road, and 2.5- to 3-storey buildings on the lower land adjacent to the open space. So moving to the elevations, I'll start with the 3-storey flat building. And I'll just zoom in. This elevation is the elevation which would front the open space. So we have Daisy Hill Court phase 1 development in this position. At the northwestern end of Daisy Hill Court building, development is 4 stories in height, and it is at a slightly higher level than phase 2 land. So the 3-storey building would sit on slightly lower land than the phase 1 building. Just looking at the elevations, this is the east elevation, is the elevation which would face Daisy Hill Court. None of the flats would have windows on the gables of the 3-storey block. But this elevation is referred to in the updates report because I have clarified in that there are windows at each of the storey levels to provide light into communal corridors, which provide access to the flats. This is the kind of rear elevation of the apartment building, which would face into the site. There are, in this location, which is the location closest to Daisy Hill Court, there is a first floor living room glazed door access onto a balcony, and a similar arrangement on the upper floor. It's proposed that the side of those balconies are fitted with privacy screens. Just moving to some other elevations now. Oh, I'll just show you the floor plan of that block first of all. Sorry, let me just go back. So the accommodation in that block is spread over 3 floors. We have 4.
Apologies, Tracy. Have we lost Councillor Button, Leonie? Sorry about this, Tracy.
No, we haven't. She's just got her video turned off.
Thank you.
Okay. So accommodation split over 3 floors, 4 flats on the ground floor, 5 on the 2 upper floors. You can see the central corridor I referred to earlier on in the elevations. That central corridor has a glazed window at the end of it to provide daylight to that access route. All the flats, both in this block and in the 2 other flatted buildings, have lift access to all floors. All of the dwellings, both the bungalows and the flats, meet building regulations, accessible and adaptable home standard. So this is a block of 2 flats. This is the block that's situated closer to the open space. So this is a 2-storey building. This is the 2-storey building, which includes 2 flats, which is located closer to Bluebell Road. The same, most of the dwellings proposed are single-storey bungalows, and this is a typical elevation of a bungalow proposed on the site. The 3-dormer bungalows, again, this is a typical elevation. And the residence pavilion building, this includes a kind of communal lounge, conservatory area, and there's a small office and a guest suite. As referred to previously, policy R42 requires the delivery of green infrastructure improvements, including public open space. This plan was formed part of the legal agreement for the first phase of development and identifies the open space around the site, which is subject to policy R42. Phase 1 development secured public access to this land to the north, which is known as Strawberry Fields, and Phase 2 development is required to bring forward a public open space on this land here. On this plan, it was anticipated that there was going to be kind of 2 phases of development, and it's obviously apparent now that this second phase is being split and delivered in two phases. But phase 2, which is the current scheme which we are considering, requires provision of an open space. So the application does include a proposal for that open space, and what is proposed is a kind of naturalistic landscape treatment and a planting scheme that delivers a range of different types of habitats, including amenity and rough grassland, wildflower meadows, native tree and shrub planting. There is a water feature proposed as kind of a focal point to that public open space, but that forms part of a much larger attenuation feature, that is proposed to manage surface water runoff associated with the development. In terms of public access, there are formal and informal routes proposed. The formal routes connect with access routes to the north, i.e. Strawberry Fields, and a new route will connect the open space. Sorry, I'll just go back. We'll connect the open space via this route to the river walk, which runs adjacent to the river and to the county wildlife site. In terms of landscaping within the site, just again getting your orientation, we've got Bluebell Road here. The mature trees and hedgerows along that frontage would be retained. And then within the site, the scheme includes ornamental and structural planting of front garden areas, trees within front gardens and in these cases back gardens. And then there's an avenue of street trees which would continue the line of trees that you saw in the phase 1 development. These would run through the site, and this is the location of the residents' shared garden area, which is in front of the Pavilion building. There's reference in the report to the relationship of the scheme of phase 1 development and phase 2, and particularly Daisy Hill Court. So I've just got a few slides just kind of providing more information about that relationship. This is phase 1 development, so just a reminder, it comprised three blocks. This is Daisy Hill Court, and it's the northwestern kind of end section of that block, which is closest to phase 2. I'll just zoom in again. So the northwestern end of that block is 4 stories, and at the northwestern end there are 2 flats on each floor. If I call this flat the front flat, this fronts into the site and to that tree-lined access route and parking area. So this front flat is a 2-bedroom flat. It has a living room located in the corner position with a glazed door access onto an external balcony and a window facing to the front, kitchen and 2 bedrooms with windows, single windows, as single aspect rooms. This is a stair core with a window. Then the rear flat, again, a living room in a corner position, a glazed door onto an external balcony and a window looking to the rear, i.e. across towards the Yare Valley, kitchen position. Just translating that into the elevation. Front flat, rear flat, 2 flats on each floor. So just in terms of windows, this is the glazed doors out onto the balcony of the front flat, bedroom window, stair core, and then you move to the rear flat, bedroom, glazed lounge door onto the balcony. The applicant has produced a number of CGIs just showing rendered views of that relationship. This view is taken from within phase 2, showing the proposed 3-storey apartment building. This is the rear at the end elevation of Daisy Hill Court. So there's a 10.8 metre gap between the 2 buildings, and in this view you're looking out across the proposed open space towards the Yare. This view is taken within phase 1. This is the end of Daisy Hill Court and the front flats I was referring to earlier. Phase 2 is visible here. So we've got the proposed residence pavilion building, the proposed 3-storey apartment building. This is a view from within phase 2, the 3-storey apartment building. Members will note in the report that there are 14 affordable dwellings proposed as part of this scheme, and all 14 of those dwellings would be located within this single block. And Daisy Hill Court is is visible here. So these are the kind of front flats which would these kind of front onto that tree-lined avenue that you saw in the photographs previously. And this is the residence pavilion, and this area is parking for the apartments as well as some visitor parking. And this is the last slide, Chair. This is a view standing with your back to the open space, looking into the site. So these are the rear flats of Daisy Hill Court. You have the residence pavilion building visible, and this is the proposed 3-storey apartment building. This has been rendered to show the proposed landscaping treatment of that elevation. It's proposed to fit kind of a simple wire system to those 2 gables, and the planting scheme will include climbers at the foot of those of that facade. And I think, Chair, that concludes the presentation of the proposal.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. We move on now to speakers, and the first one will be Councillor Lovick. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, we also have a member of the...
Jackie, you're off.
Sorry, Chair, but we also have a member of the public speaking on behalf of Mrs. Joan Eastwood.
Yeah, did she go after Councillor Lovick or before?
It's up to the speaker.
Carol, do you want to go before Councillor Lovick or after?
So I'll just unmute her. Leonie, could you unmute Mrs. Eastwood, please? Thank you.
We got you now, Carol.
I think it would be helpful to go after, because I think Councillor Lubbock is speaking on behalf of many residents.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. That would be helpful. Councillor Lovick, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to voice my objections to this application, which focuses on the inclusion of the 3-storey apartment block containing the 14 flats. I believe this block will have a detrimental effect on the amenity of the existing residents of Daisy Hill Court, affecting their daylight and their outlook, and I believe it's contrary to policy DM2. This block, as we've heard from Tracy's presentation, is just 10.8 metres away from the 4-storey Daisy Hill Court, and for the 8 homeowners whose flats are at the end of this block, their outlook will be, to a greater or lesser extent, a blank brick wall, albeit it may have some greenery growing up it if it manages to grow. Thus depriving them of some daylight and an uninterrupted view along the Yare Valley to the west and the setting sun. It was this outlook and the assurance from McCarthy and Stone that they would only be bungalows and chalets on phase 2 development with nothing to obscure their outlook that actually encouraged them to buy their flats. In May 2018, they were even shown details of the said bungalows in a planning application submitted to the council, but this was later withdrawn. So imagine their dismay to be told sometime later that everything had changed and their view would now be interrupted and in some cases lost completely by a 4-storey block, later changed to a 3-storey block of flats. I feel it was morally wrong to hoodwink these elderly and in some cases vulnerable people into buying flats which promised a view and yet within a few years that view is taken away and replaced with the blank brick wall. Whatever the reason for this change, I feel it is unacceptable and that a compromise should have been reached between the developers and the council to honour that commitment. By placing the very much needed social housing in a different position and in a lower form, say a 2-storey block like that on phase 1 of the development. In terms of design, I feel this 3-storey integrates poorly with the neighbouring Daisy Hill Court and the Yare Valley as a whole, and presents an awkward transition to the single-storey bungalows across the rest of the site. I therefore ask you to refuse this application on the grounds that it does not adhere to the council's own development planning policies, DM2, ensuring satisfactory living conditions, and DM3, delivering high quality design. However, I do also have a few other concerns. I think there is inadequate car parking on the site, and I fear that any overspill will be in the roads opposite Bluebell Road, causing disturbance to residents and buses. I also believe that there is a danger in the access that is being proposed. Numbers 1, 2, and 3, the plots 1, 2, and 3, their access is very close to the main access on Bluebell Road, and I feel this will cause a dangerous conflict. The issue of construction site parking is also a concern, and although there is a condition, I believe it ought to be strengthened to say that the developers should manage construction traffic in a way that it is off the public highway, ideally on their site, but whatever the case, off the public highway. And finally, there is the issue of the open space. Who owns it? Who will manage it? Will they pay for bins and seats in perpetuity and for year on year? Not only the litter bins themselves, but the cost of emptying those bins. And in the first phase, we've had problems with that. I don't want those problems repeated. And I think that the developer should actually pay for the litter bins and seats. Oh, and one thing I did forget also was the bus shelter. We have a regular bus service outside the site, but nevertheless, there is no contribution from the developers to provide shelters to those bus stops and seats. Now, if this is to be a truly sustainable development, we should at least have a contribution from the developer so that people are encouraged to use public transport rather than private cars. And certainly bus shelters are basic, and seats in those bus shelters. So thank you very much for your time, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lovick. We've still got other speakers, Councillor Neil, so we'll move on to them first. Carol, would you like to come in and speak? Oh, can I ask councillors to keep their video on, because when they go off, it's hard to tell if they're there or not, and if one disappears, we have to start again. So just keep your videos on just in case. There's 2 already disappeared already. Jackie?
Yes, please could members keep their videos on, please. I just wanted to say that Councillor Lovett was also speaking as a ward councillor, which is why I allowed her to go over the three minutes. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Carol, would you like to come in? And you have 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you. It's a little thing up the top corner that say unmute.
Okay, I thought I was going to be unmuted by...
Yeah, that's fine. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of an individual resident of Daisy Hill Court whose apartment is affected. I know you're very familiar with planning policies, but I looked at DM2 amenity, and that's given a bit in the report, but I think the most important aspect was actually left out. And it says particular regard is given to the prevention of overshadowing, prevention of loss of light, prevention of outlook. And the important word for me is prevention. The developer built phase 1, so knows exactly what amenities the residents expected to continue to enjoy. And of course, they know the need to maximise the outlook across the Aire Valley for everyone, not just the new incoming phase 2. Phase 2 is a 1.6 hectare site, so it is a large site. Tracy showed the master plan, and if you looked at that right from the outset, you would not see any large apartment block on the southern edge, only a large care home right in the other corner. The distance between the apartments is 10.8 metres. My understanding is that if you have an apartment block, that you should increase that distance as each story is increased. And I don't understand why there wasn't a comment in your report about that design flaw. And phase 1 does have a really good transition between Leander Court and Daisy Hill Court. Again, surely we should expect the same quality of design at the other end of the building. If the issue of step down was so critical, then why wasn't it identified in phase 1? Master planning is intended to ensure that phases are not developed piecemeal and do not have issues. If that planning issue was known before the building was occupied, then actually it's a very serious matter. Surely homeowners should expect to enjoy a new home for longer than a few months, and the planning issue was exposed within a few months. If the planning officer also confirmed that this does have an impact, but tries to minimise that impact. Well, a well-designed home with natural light and a stimulating outlook is vital for this population. Nobody could describe 100 square metres as objections.
If you could wind up now, please, Carol. You had your 3 minutes.
I'll do it quickly.
Thank you.
Phase 2 residents can choose whether they wish to live here. These nearest neighbours cannot. And they should not be expected to move if they don't like it or make changes to their brand new home as a way of dealing with bad design. The resident I'm talking about is 91. That's completely different than the residents for phase 2 at 55 plus. They are not equivalent.
Okay, Carol, I'll have to stop you now because you've gone right over your 3 minutes, I'm afraid. I did let you have at least another half a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Carla, if you could unmute, this is the developer.
Chair, can I just remind you and members that under the new rules, the agent has 6 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Does she? Okay, thank you. Didn't know that. You have 6 minutes to speak, Carla.
Thank you, Chair, and hopefully I won't take up all of those 6 minutes today.
Thank you.
As you say, I'm Carla Forgoni and I'm a planning agent representing the applicants today. Before I start, I'd like to confirm in response to two of the objections from Councillor Lubbock that my client would agree to a contribution to the improvements of the bus stops to include a shelter and seating through the Section 106 agreement. And we would also agree to an amendment to the Construction and Environmental Management Plan to ensure that construction parking does not impact on the public highway. So I'm sure that can be dealt with under a suitably worded condition. As very clearly outlined by your officers, the proposal submitted by my clients includes the delivery of 50 new retirement dwellings, most of which are single storey, bungalows with some apartments, and importantly, affordable housing in socially rented units, all of which delivers additional housing choice for local residents on an allocated site. The application was submitted last year, and my clients have actively engaged with the local community, the council, and statutory consultees to ensure that their views are taken on board where possible. In response to the comments we've received, we've reduced the scheme in height, removing the 4th storey, and as a result, the proposal before you has gained the support of your officers. We've also reduced the number of units from 54 to 50 to reflect this change. We understand that there's been a concern about the density and height of proposals from some of the local residents of Daisy Hill Court. However, as you've been told today by Ms Armitage, the proposals have taken on board and align with the submitted master plan, and this is all in response to discussions with your officers. As set out in the master plan document, the second phase of this development will also deliver new pedestrian links from Bluebell Road to the Yare Valley Walk, as well as opening up the land to the west for public access. The committee report confirms that the proposal is compliant with local planning policy DM2 concerning the issue of neighbour amenity and provides acceptable separation distances between the proposed building and the existing neighbouring properties. Additional daylight sunlight studies have been provided to assess the impact of the proposal on the residents of Daisy Hill Court, and these assessments have been scrutinised by your officers, who have agreed that the proposal will not have an unacceptable impact on the properties at Daisy Hill Court. The layout of the scheme has been carefully considered, and the proposal includes a residence pavilion to allow residents to meet on the site, and the landscaping of the scheme has been carefully designed and provides a high quality environment for the proposed residents of the scheme. The height and massing is considered to be acceptable by your officers and is consistent with the master plan, and it steps down across the site from Daisy Hill Court, which will help minimise the impact on the Yare Valley and would not be unduly prominent in views from Bluebell Road or the Yare Valley itself. There are many benefits to the proposal. Retirement housing is recognised by the government as being a critical need as people are living longer lives, and the proportion of older people in the population is increasing. It enables older people to remain living in the community and out of institutions while receiving the support that they need. Research shows that for every retirement property sold, it generates 2 moves further down the housing chain, which frees up homes at differing stages of the housing ladder for different demographics, thereby providing more housing options and a more responsive housing market. The scheme will provide a valuable contribution towards meeting the need in Norwich for older people with a low impact form of housing and in a high quality landscape setting. The development will also secure a generous amount of public open space and provide access and ecology benefits. The overall result will be a distinctive place that's sensitively designed and relates well to local character, including the other phases of the development. The site is close to the centre of Eton Village and will support and enhance the viability and sustainability of the local economy. A recent report entitled Healthier and Happier is an analysis of the fiscal and well-being benefits of building more homes for later living, which has been developed by a former government economist, which has the following findings. Each person living in one of these types of properties enjoys a reduced risk of health challenges, contributing to fiscal savings to the NHS and social care services of around £3,500 per year. Those in specialist housing are half as likely to have falls resulting from fractures, injuries, and costly inpatient stays. In conclusion then, after careful consideration, the proposal has been recommended for approval by officers who provide a cogent and measured analysis as to why it's appropriate in both principle and in design terms. I would therefore hope that you're able to endorse your officer's recommendation today and grant planning approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Carla. I'll just go to our planning officer, Miss Armitage. Tracy.
Chair, please. We need to, Councillor Lubbock needs to leave
yes.
the meeting now. Sorry, Councillor Lubbock. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Lubbock.
We'll put you in the waiting room. Thank you.
Okay, she's gone now. I have got a couple of people who want to ask questions, so I will come to you. I have marked you down. Tracy, did you want to come back on any of the comments or things what was said?
No, I think there are a lot of comments, so I think probably if I can just respond to questions, is that?
Well, sorry, can I butt in at that point?
Yeah.
I think that there was at least 3 points that Councillor Lubbock made that I think it might be useful to address before we move to questions, and they were inadequate car parking, dangerous access, and questions about who owns and manages the public open space. Tracy?
Yeah,
and
okay,
and
that's fine.
And the buses as well.
Well, Yeah, I think the speaker for the applicant has indicated that they're willing to make a contribution to the bus shelters and seats at the 2 bus stops.
Do we have to put that in the planning application?
You would need to add it to the recommendation so that it's included in the section 106, and then the speaker Carla also mentioned amending the environmental management plan so that construction vehicles were parked off the public highway. I don't think there needs to be an amendment to the conditions to cover that. I think we can that can be covered within existing conditions. But I think the 3 points that Councillor Lubbock raised probably do need addressing before move to questions.
Okay,
Before I come to you, Tracy, Sally's back on again. Can I ask you not to do that, Sally, if possible? Okay,
I'm getting
Tracy.
a bad line and I'm breaking. Keith, I'm getting a bad line and I keep dipping in and out. That's why I'm having to reboot again.
Okay, can I?
Is that best if I just leave the meeting, do you think?
Tracy, Jackie, no?
You're muted, Jackie.
Sorry, I know, please. No, but the thing is, you probably need to tell us that you're coming out of the meeting and then we have to stop and then let you back in again. But I think it's fine for now because I know that you were in the background. But just if anybody does need to leave the meeting, we just need to know. Thank you. You need to be there. And I just remind members, you need to be there for the entire item to vote. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the layout plan to talk about parking and the access. So just bear with me.
Well, it was there, Tracy. It's gone again.
Oh, sorry. Did you not see that?
No, that came
very
up
briefly.
and then disappeared. That's it.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so in terms of parking, all the properties will have parking. The exception is the block of 14 apartments, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But most of the bungalows have a garage and a driveway. So most of the bungalows have provision for 1 or 2 cars within their plot. Some of the bungalows don't have a garage and they have an allocated parking space which would go with the freehold of that property. The flats have parking provided, and the block of 14 apartments has a communal car park with 10 parking spaces. And in addition to that, there are 8 visitor spaces across the development. So in terms of parking provision, County Highways are satisfied that it provides a satisfactory level of parking, and it's in accordance with policy. In terms of the site access, I know Councillor Lubbock's was concerned about the driveways. I think of probably these properties being quite close to the junction of the site onto Bluebell Road. Again, the layout has been endorsed by County Highways. In terms of the amount of traffic movement associated with this type of development, it's likely to be very low. So in terms of potential conflicts, the County Highways have made a judgment that those conflicts are very unlikely to occur, given the low trip generation. In terms of the management of the public open space, and indeed all the open space that surrounds the site, the land which I referred to earlier, which is around 17.5 hectares of land, that land is currently managed by the landowner, and it's managed under a high-level stewardship agreement with with Natural England.
Sorry, Tracy, can I think we've got a slide that shows the land areas, don't we?
Yeah, let me just go back to that then.
Thank you.
Sorry. Well, I'll just use this one for now.
That's fine.
So all of this land is managed by the landowner under this high-level stewardship agreement. Long-term management of that land it will be and has been secured by the legal agreement for development of this site. And the policy requires management to be secured into perpetuity for this land. And the management will fall onto the applicants to identify an appropriate management arrangement and body for that land. And that is the arrangement that's been agreed for Strawberry Fields, and the public open space, which will be coming forward as phase 2, will be subject to a legal agreement, which will require long-term management arrangements to be set out and to be secured into perpetuity. So the management body and the responsible body will be identified as part of that that process, but it's anticipated that will remain with the landowner, but funded through contributions that would be made by residents of the development as it's delivered in the 3 phases. In terms of management will include seating, litter bins, whatever type of other facilities may be required to ensure that the land is managed appropriately for the type of public access that's being proposed.
Okay. Sorry, Chair, just before we move on to questions, can I just make a couple of smaller points? I mean, Mrs. Eastwood referred to the wording of policy DM2, and just for completeness, insofar as it relates to existing occupiers, DM2 says development will be permitted where it would not result in an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the area or the living or working conditions or operations of neighbouring occupants. Particular regard will be given to, and then it goes on to list 3 things: A, the prevention of overlooking and the loss of privacy; B, the prevention of overshadowing and loss of light and outlook; and C, the prevention of disturbance from noise, odour, vibration, air or artificial light pollution. I think as far as this application is concerned, only A and B are relevant, but the preamble to that list, to my mind, indicates that some impact may well be acceptable, and that is the issue that we need to address, or the committee needs to address, when determining this particular application. Not that there's no impact, but whether or not the impact that does exist is acceptable or not. The committee may choose that it's not. Our view as officers is that that level of impact is acceptable. The other point that I just wanted to make was about a comment that was made about what you might expect as a resident of phase 1. And I'm just going to share my screen, which is again the presentation. Oh, what's lots of slides I've got open. Actually, let's see. No, you can't see that. Sorry, Tracy, could you share your screen again?
Yeah.
And could you show the slide with the master plan?
The master plan.
Showing the building heights, please. That's the one. Thank you very much. Could you maximize that? Great. Oh,
sorry, it's gone.
That's okay. I'll get to it. Now, I appreciate that there was previously an application for development adjacent to phase 1 that was all for bungalows, but in terms of the master plan that actually accompanied the planning application that gave consent for phase 1, you can see that dotted line across the site, which indicates to one side of that line a 1 to 2 story dwellings would be acceptable, and to the other side of that line 2.5 to 3 stories with varied heights along open space might be considered acceptable. So I think, notwithstanding the planning application that was in at the time that people may have bought their properties in phase 1, there was already an indication at that point in time that higher properties across the site may well be acceptable. Again, the committee needs to consider whether the relationship between the 4-story property at Daisy Hill Court and the 3-story property proposed as part of this application is acceptable. Sorry, thank you, Chair. Those are the points that I wanted to make.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to questions when we get back to full screen. I've got 2 indicated. I've got a couple as well, but I will wait for mine. Councillor Neil, did you have a question?
Chair, before you start, can I
Yes.
just say that Councillor Button has left the meeting due to technical reasons. Thank you.
Yeah, we thank you for putting that up on chat, Jackie. Thank you. Councillor Neil?
Yeah, sorry, I've got 2 questions, but before that, I'm still not clear what our officer David Parkin, from what he said about what the people knew and whether it's the responsibility of this planning committee and planning department. We seem to have that Mrs. Eastwood is saying that they were never aware that a property of that height would be built in that position, and they were told by the developer that they would only be bungalows. And I know you've just shown this original, I don't know what we'd call it, a floor plan, whether they would have been made aware of that, or whether it was something that was only us as a council would have been aware of. So could you clarify that?
Yeah, the master plan that was required when the site was allocated, it came in as, it accompanied the application for phase 1. I think that's right in saying, Tracy, thank you. So that plan would have been in the public domain at the time that planning permission was granted for the phase 1 development. Now, so there was an indication at that time that we as a council, and indeed the developer, considered the possibility of 2.5 and 3-story properties across the site. From a planning point of view, it's to a degree irrelevant as to what the people who bought properties in phase 1 were aware of or weren't aware of. We have to make a planning judgment, and we've made a planning judgment as officers, and the committee has to make a judgment on planning terms as to whether or not the relationship between Daisy Hill Court and the new development is acceptable, whether or not the applicant, the residents of Daisy Hill Court thought that they might actually get something different. But the point in showing the landscape, pardon me, the point in showing the landscape master plan is that that document was in the public domain and accompanied the planning application for phase 1.
Thank you, David. Paul, you got a couple of more questions?
Yeah. Tracy mentioned at the beginning there was an obligation to improve pedestrian and cycle access. I didn't see, was that just on the actual building area or the amenity area as well that they have to develop?
The policy talks about within the Yare Valley corridor. So I think the requirement relates to kind of access within the open space areas. I mean, what I would say is the open space areas include a substantial amount of land, much of which is a county wildlife site, and is a fen habitat. So The landscape proposal is all about making sure that landscape improvements to the Yare Valley corridor are sympathetic to that natural setting of the Yare Valley. So public access is being provided to that land by phase 1 and phase 2. It's principally formal and informal access, and some of those paths will be mown paths, some of them will be have a harder surface and be more durable. But that's the nature of the access that's being proposed as part of the scheme.
So
there's a landscape
for pedestrians, not for cyclists. And the other question, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you know something different, Paul?
No, just that you mentioned that there was an obligation to improve access for pedestrian cyclists, but I haven't seen anything in there that cyclists were going to have improved.
I would need to check, but I think phase 1 potentially included a contribution to the shared provision along Bluebell Road. I'd need to check back on that, but I think that was the case.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was, this blank 3-story gable, a pair of gable ends, that's a matter of contention. They've put on proposals to put this wire mesh or frame. Has there been any evidence that what they're doing, that climbing plants will actually be able to climb from the ground level to 3 stories? It seems quite an ambition, and whether it's just looks good on the plan and it actually would not actually be possible. So you still end up with a brick wall.
Yeah, well, the suggestion for that landscape proposal came from our landscape officer within the council. So I think she felt that given the position and orientation of that facade, there would be the scope to promote climbing species, on that elevation. I wouldn't like to comment whether it will ever get up to the top story, but certainly I would have thought ground floor going up towards the 1st story level would be achievable. I wouldn't like to comment about the height beyond that.
I mean, there are. I think it depends on the species that gets chosen. I mean, there are climbing plants that will cover tall buildings. You only have to look at the Gerald's Mill down by the riverside, and there's a climbing plant up the tower side of that, and that's taller than that. I think that's about 4 stories. So yeah, there are climbing plants that will do that.
So will there be an obligation in, say, the 106 agreement that they have to plant something that will physically actually do the job?
Yes, they will, and that they will have to maintain that that plant as well. Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Okay. I lost her. Where is she? Oh, Councillor Bergerline down the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, my questions kind of go in the same direction to Paul's questions with regards to a previous planning application and the master plan. So I know that we can pay regard to previous planning applications that have been input. Now, the fact that the developers have input a planning application with, I believe there were bungalows instead of those flat, should signal, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and I guess that's where my question is going, that they deemed it viable to actually have the proposals for bungalows only. And if I want to be cynical, it looks like they've put it in, so people looked at it, thought that's what they get, and then they've withdrew it. So could you explain why they've withdrawn the planning application? Was there any discussion with planning officers with regards to that it was not suitable in any form? So that's my first question. And then I've got another one regarding the master.
Sounded like
No, I'm just wondering. I just want to understand why they've withdrawn that planning application, whether that has been with regards to feedback from officers.
The answer to that question is yes. They when McCarthy and Stone put in the application that was purely for bungalows, they were advised that from a planning and design point of view, the officer opinion was that going straight from 4 stories, bearing in mind that built edge that's on date that is provided by Daisy Hill Court, that's, as far as the open space is concerned, that's a 4-storey building. It's quite a big 4-storey building. The advice that they got from officers at that point in time was that going from 4 stories on a slightly higher level down to single-storey on a lower level of land didn't handle the transition from a design and landscape point of view particularly well. So McCarthy and Stone were actually encouraged to withdraw that planning application by planning officers.
And was advice given to give a block of flats or
yes, it was. The advice was given in accordance with the landscape master plan that that taller buildings were necessary to kind of create to manage that transition from the Daisy Hill Court properties down to.
Again, Sandra, if I could just come in and tell Miss Eastwood, you can't come in anymore, I'm afraid. You just have to be there, and you can't answer any more questions. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Bergeron, you got?
Yes, and that leads me to my question about the master plan. So, when the master plan was designed, what was in the space that we're now talking about, the 3-storey flats? I understand that there was a block of flat, but that was located somewhere else. You know, let's forget. You know, I mean, I understand that there were indications that the lower level it might be suitable for 2 to 3 storey or 2.5 to 3 storey buildings. But I'd like to understand what the master plan actually showed in that location, please.
Well, I mean, the master plan is a master plan. It identifies constraints across the site. And it may well have shown a different building in a different location, but the point of the master plan is that it identifies the limits for development. So 2.5 to 3 storey across the part of the site that was shown on the slide that Tracy put up for us a little while ago. As far as the master plan was concerned, a different an arrangement of buildings between 2.5 storey to 3 storey within that area of land would have been acceptable in principle. Now we're obviously faced with the application. We're deciding whether or not that relationship is acceptable. As I said, in a way, it doesn't. Sorry, Tracy, do you want to come in at that point?
Yes, please. I mean, I was just going to say that I have referred to in the committee report more details of the master plan document, which, as I suggested, you know, is quite a detailed document, and it included a series of parameter plans which came out of an analysis of the site and its surroundings. There was within the text of the master plan reference to the phase 2 of the development being lower density than phase 1 and including generally 1 and 2 storey buildings and potentially a care home. So that was indicated. But what I would suggest, emphasize here is the master plan is about giving an idea of the broad parameters of schemes as they come forward. It's not set. It's not fixing precisely in the form of like an outline planning application would what those restrictions are. So it's a master plan is produced ahead of detailed schemes being prepared. So there was a range of images, a range of parameter plans and some supporting text. And that did suggest that the form of development for phase 2 was going to be different to phase 1. Phase 1 is large 2 to 3, 4 storey apartment blocks, large blocks within a landscape setting. I think the master plan was clear that the phases going forward were going to be different, and it was going to be lower buildings and lower density.
And in essence, that's what's sorry, Keith, but just to finish off. But in essence, that's what's before the committee. You do have a development that is largely different to phase 1, and now the committee has to decide whether or not the relationships between the existing development and the proposed developments are accessible. Not whether or not, in principle, 3 storey is acceptable or not, but whether the relationships between the existing 4-storey building and the proposed 3-storey building are acceptable. As I said at the beginning, it's in a way, and I know this sounds a bit harsh, but certainly from a planning point of view, what the residents of Daisy Hill Court thought they might get is not a material planning consideration. It's the actual relationship between what is proposed and what is existing that is the key issue here.
Okay, Jackie, did you want to come in? No, thank you.
Chair,
I've got 3. Yes.
So I was just going to say I was involved in this case prior to Tracy and David's involvement before sort of handing it over to another officer. Now I think some of the context which perhaps been which has not been said is that the original proposals from McCarthy and Stone proposed that this scheme would be a C2 use. So they were proposing entirely bungalows, and there was a sort of a discussion at pre-application stage as to whether these were C2 or C3 dwellings. The difference being that C2 wouldn't deliver affordable housing, whereas C3 would. So I believe the initial plans that McCarthy and Stone had around the time that some of the people on the neighbouring development were purchasing their properties would have been those proposals that McCarthy had sort of kicking around at pre-application stage. But the way the sort of discussions have gone, is we've argued very strongly that these are C3. I think McCarthy and Stone lost either an appeal or some case law elsewhere in the country, which sort of helped our argument that these were in fact C3 dwellings. There then was the need to provide affordable housing on the site and provide something on the site which would be taken on by a registered provider. That's when they looked at providing a block of flats on the site. So that's the context, and that's so the sort of the flats arrived when we won the argument that these were C3 dwellings and affordable housing needed to be provided on the site. So that's sort of the wider context. But as David says, you know, that helps. I hope that helps members in terms of context. But the decision to be made today is on the basis of policy and the immediate implications, irrespective to a certain extent of what. Unfortunately, McCarthy and Stone may or may not have told residents who are moving into the site next door.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to ask 3 questions and then Mike Sands come in. Tracy, mine are totally different to what's been said at the moment. It's for people over the age of 55. If someone's selecting a fruit share, can they sell it to someone who's a lot younger? 2, is there any disability bungalows there where you can get wheelchairs in or anything like that for disability living? Because that is supposed to be for old people. I didn't know if that was easy access for disabled people or not, and I didn't see nothing in the report about that. And 2, and this totally different, that might be to the developers, any thought about putting a shop in there so they haven't got to go too far to buy a local newspaper or a pint of milk or something? But that is totally different to what the plans are, I would have thought. Thank you.
In terms of age restriction, the age restriction is imposed by a planning condition, so that will relate to the land into perpetuity. You know, it's a requirement that would be transferable in terms of future tenants. In terms of all the dwellings on the site, all the flats and all the bungalows are being built to the building regs accessible and adaptable home standard. So they all exceed national space standards. They've got larger rooms, which make them more suitable for people with difficulty with mobility. All the flats have lift access to all the floors. So that is aimed at the market that the dwellings are being marketed towards. Can't answer your question about shops, Keith, but I mean, other than to stress that there is good access to Eton District Centre.
Thank you. Councillor Sands, you still got a question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a series of 4 questions, if I may. I'll ask them quickly. First of all, the viability assessment. I don't understand why the viability of this development has suddenly become an issue. The developers would have known right from the outset what their projections were likely to be. Question number 2, looking at the map on page 56 of the package that councillors have received, at where the block of flats is located, is there any reason why it could not be moved to westwards, to within 2 metres of the boundary, which would largely free up the views of people in the phase 1 development? And the third question, is there any reason why the block cannot be reduced to 2.5 stories, which would further ease the situation? And question 4, the evacuation and fire prevention facilities in this block. I understand that there are lifts, but in the event of a fire or some sort of emergency, we all know that lifts cannot be used, and the people living here are likely to be a little bit unsteady. Some of them may even be mobility or wheelchair users. So, you know, what provision will be put in place for that? I know that comes under building regs, but I think it's a pertinent question. And question 5, very practical question here. My great aunt Mildred lives on the top floor of this block of flats, and she visits the Pavilion for a community event. Why is there no toilet provision there, meaning she has to leave the Pavilion, go all the way back to a flat, up to the top floor if she gets taken short halfway through an event? As far as I can see, there is no toilet provision in this Pavilion, which seems to be very, very short-sighted.
Tracy. Tracy, are you there to answer them?
Yes, yes. Viability first. In terms of viability, I mean, in terms of policy requirement, 33% equates to 17. It's clear from the report, 14 flats are proposed to be affordable. We've come to that position having gone externally to an independent advisor on viability, and we normally use district value, as you know, but we went to a company called BMP, and they've reviewed the viability situation on our behalf. It's been subject to very close scrutiny, and it took several months really to come to a conclusion about the viability position. And that length of time was because the BMP advised that we ought to go externally for a full cost audit of the costs associated with the development. And having done that, having reviewed current costs of construction and looking at the predicted values of the development, it was considered that a full policy compliant of 33% would not be viable, and that 14 would be the viable level. In terms of moving the block, can I just go to the layout plan? So just bear with me one moment. So when you say westward, do you mean moving it towards the open space? Sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor Sands.
My apologies. Yeah, essentially moving that open space to the other side of the block by moving the block into that open space. It would mean a little bit of a modification of the turning head, a bit of a modification of the parking provision in front of the flats, but it would actually preserve the same amount of space and would alleviate any concerns regarding views.
Well, I think moving it in this direction, which I think is what you're suggesting, I mean, this block will still be visible from Daisy Hill Court. I mean, I think we talked about the position of living rooms on the corner positions of the floor plans. So moving it forward, it would still be visible in those views, and obviously from the interface point of view, it wouldn't align with development proposed kind of to the north. So I'm not sure about how consistent that frontage would look.
And can I just add? I mean, I think moving it actually out into the open space could actually make the relationship between Daisy Hill Court and the flats actually worse, because the flats that are on the corner, the ones that Tracy referred to as, I think, the back flats, they have their balcony on the corner. So at least if you move it out into the open space, you're putting the building more in their arc of view than it actually is at the moment.
Whether the design could be 2.5 story, I think you're suggesting potentially having, the top floor within the roof volume. I don't know whether that's feasible. That's not what's proposed, but I suspect McCarthy and Stone could explore that if that was members felt that was necessary. In terms of fire egress, it's not just lift access to all floors. Clearly there's also staircase access, so you have either means to evacuate a building. I'll just go to the floor plan of the pavilion.
Before you do that, in terms of evacuating the building, aren't there special devices that you can put on each floor near the stairwells for people who have mobility problems to be helped down the stairs, kind of like a sort of like a wheelchair type thing that will negotiate stairs? I've seen them in other buildings.
Yes, I mean there are evacuation chairs, for example, in City Hall. I know not many of us are actually in City Hall at the moment, but yeah, there are evacuation chairs that you can use to get down the stairs. You can also kind of create. I mean, in certain circumstances, the advice is if there is a fire, each door to the room is actually a fire door. The doors close, and the advice is you stay where you are. If you're vulnerable, you stay where you are and await to be rescued. But whilst Councillor Sands, I know you said it was a pertinent point, from a planning point of view, it isn't, because these are matters covered by the building regs, and McCarthy and Stone, when constructing the flats, will have to comply with the building regs in the same way that they had to comply with the building regs for Daisy Hill Court. So there are ways and means, but they're not within the remit of this particular council. This particular committee. Tracy, there was one other point about the toilet provision thing.
Yes, well, I've just put up the floor plan of the pavilion building, which shows an office, kitchenette and a store, and then this is the lounge, function area and balcony. This is a guest suite which includes an ensuite. I don't know whether that's made available when the accommodation isn't being used, but I don't know if there's a reason why they haven't provided that facility. It would seem reasonable, Councillor Sands, if you're using the lounge to have access to toilet facilities, and this is something that we could be raised with the applicant.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, before we move on, can I just pick up on the point that Councillor Sands has made about reducing the height of the building, and I suspect this kind of goes to the kind of core of one issue of one of the main issues here. Any reduction that you get in the height of the building is actually would lead to the loss of affordable units, and we've got 14 on this site. So you start taking units off, then you're trading them. You're losing affordable units. So this scheme is delivering 14 of those, as well as the as well as the bungalows. That's not a reason for approving a relationship that is unacceptable if that is the conclusion of committee, but that is something that needs to weigh in the planning balance.
Thank you. Tracy, could you put us back to main screen, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions from anyone? I see you, Sandra. Councillor Stookley first, and then Councillor Samaji, then Councillor Brookline.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tracy, for the report. I've got a number of questions, but first, you mentioned earlier in your report that there were freeholds. Can you just confirm that these are long leases with the usual service charges applied to them? That is the usual McCarthy and Stone model, please? And then I've got a series of questions.
Okay. My understanding is that there is the properties will be sold as a freehold. So purchasers will buy the freehold of them.
Can I just stop you there, Tracy? We just all received a message from Carlo. Is that allowed, Jackie? Sorry, Carlo. Tracy, you're Jackie,
Yes.
you're muted.
Sorry, Chair, you need to just read out the message, but it's a message from the applicant. But can we just ask?
That seemed to me that Miss Eastwood could actually do the same thing, and I'm not sure this is going to be allowed.
Chair,
it shouldn't.
Chair, could I just say to the agent and to the members of the public who've joined in that you've had your opportunity to speak, and that you can only sort of message through to the messages are really for technical reasons, not for any messages about anything, but for open and transparency, we're including them to everybody at the meeting. The message from Carla was to say that her client would be willing to add a toilet to the pavilion, and that sort of just follows up from something that Tracy said. But anything else, if you privately message me, I will make sure that if it is appropriate, I'll share it.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Tracy.
Yeah. Freehold leasehold situation. My understanding is that all the bungalows and the private flats will be sold. The freehold will be sold to the purchaser. There will be a management charge for the landscape, for the for use of the pavilion, etc. So that will be a management charge, but purchasers will be purchasing the freehold, not a leasehold.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've got a few questions about the affordable housing and viability first. And questions are, why do members still not receive a copy of the viability assessment and the detail within it? Why are there no affordable bungalows in this situation with separate buildings? It would actually be possible to provide bungalows managed by the third party, and there is a great demand for bungalows. Why is this site not tenure blind? Has the original phase 1 viability assessment been compared to the actual sales? These properties go for premium prices, and in that viability assessment, are future profits from the upselling business model part of that assessment of profits, please? And then I have some more questions after that.
Is there any, I mean, there seem to be a lot of questions coming into this today. I mean, some of these should have been taken beforehand on policy and what's name, I believe. Councillor, well, I'm going to ask Tracy if she can answer them, but David,
well, in terms of the affordable housing and the viability, I mean the viability submitted by the applicant in terms of the viability report, as well as the review of the viability, is all on public access, so it is all available to everyone to consider and scrutinise. In why not bungalows? my understanding is that there is a demand for one-bedroomed flats in terms of this type of accommodation. It's the proposal is supported by a strategic housing officer. There's already an agreement in place for Norwich Housing Society to take on ownership of this standalone block. RPs favour standalone blocks in terms of management, and certainly this block would augment the existing block that Norwich Housing Society already manage as part of phase 1. In terms of whether the premium values are considered, BMP did look at, when looking at values, looked at comparable McCarthy schemes locally. So they did look at what is likely to be achieved for that product. They didn't just look at kind of comparable bungalows within the locality. They look at this particular product, which, as you say, does attract a premium.
Can I just add one point there on the point about tenure blind? I mean, from kind of planning point of view, tenure blind means that you shouldn't be able to tell that the block is affordable housing. I think that's the case here. It's not designed to a lower standard to any of the bungalows, or indeed to any of the existing blocks of flats on the site. So to my mind, it is tenure blind. You won't be able to tell it's affordable housing simply by looking at it. It won't look different from a design point of view to the rest of the scheme.
Councillor Stooley.
Yes, thank you for that. The reason why I asked my questions in the planning committee is because it's a public meeting, and I think everyone has the right to hear what questions are being asked, rather than.
Should we get the same ones at the next 4B?
Thank you for those answers. I think obviously clearly everyone will know that this block is the affordable housing block. Got some more questions, if I may. Did the tree management work sufficiently in phase 1, please? In other words, were there any problems with the tree management? I'm referring to.
I'm not sure. With respect, Councillor, I'm not sure how that's actually relevant to the determination of this particular planning application. You're determining this application as submitted. If there are problems with the management of the landscaping on this scheme that's before the committee, then the conditions in the section 106 would enable the council to resolve those problems. And just picking up on a point you made, I don't think the public would know that this block is actually the affordable housing.
Well, the other tenants and freeholders.
Oh yes, they might know from that point of view, but not by looking at it. They wouldn't, and that's what tenure blind means.
Okay, thank you for clarification. I'll move on to the parking, page 48, paragraph 147. Why might the EV chargers not be feasible in certain areas, in certain spots? As a curiosity.
Yeah. Can I go to the layout plan again? Just bear with me one moment. Sorry about this. There we go. In certain locations, parking is within a kind of highway bay. Well, not highway, but within to the front of the property, adjacent to the kind of main service road. In these locations, it's considered it potentially isn't feasible to have a kind of pedestal charging point, but there are charging points proposed adjacent to the pavilion, two pedestal charging points adjacent to that, which would be available to everyone to use. Most will have their own on-plot charging point, either within their garage or within their drive adjacent to their house, but where it's more remote, it's more difficult.
Okay, thank you. I've got one question about transport, which is referred to on page 48 generally. When we had the phase one, the closure of the road or partial closure of the road caused exceptionally long delays at peak times. I'd like to see a much better transport plan and an alternative route promoted to mitigate any partial closures of Bluebell Road. Is this possible? And at what stage is that implemented? Is that by condition now, for example?
Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, a management plan, is it, I think we're talking about during the construction of the development.
We're in the construction of phase one when they closed one lane of Bluebell Road. The delays in traffic were just really exceptional, and there was traffic queue back on Bluebell Road right back to the university in one direction, and I believe it was even worse in the other direction at times as well, at peak times.
That's covered by condition 4 construction management plan. I mean, we can expand on that by including traffic management as well, specifically in the wording for that, and also anything that any traffic management measures we would determine in accordance. We would assess in consultation with colleagues at county. So I think the points that you're raising could be covered through, mindful of the experiences in phase one, they could be covered through condition 4.
Okay, thank you. And my final sort of question is about going back to the entrance and the cycle lanes. This site and the road banks down quite steeply on both sides, and cycles can go do go very, very fast down there. I am concerned about visibility for cars exiting the junction onto Bluebell Road. And again, I wonder if there's something that we can do about that to ensure there's enough visibility for those cars as they emerge.
County highways have considered the access. They have said that it is the relevant visibility requirements are achievable, but they have asked for a condition to be imposed, which would agree the detailed arrangement, via condition. So they presumably would look at the more detailed design specification at that stage in terms of ensuring that it does function in a safe manner. So that is subject to a condition in terms of the detailed arrangement.
Councillor Swayze.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask this question. On page 36, paragraph 65, the Air Valley Societies say, it would appear that the developer has yet to complete the works on the public open space and footpaths associated with phase one of the development, etc., etc. They go so far as to say that we shouldn't even approve anything until they've sorted out those bits of phase one before we go on to phase two. And I was pleased when David Parkins said that, thinking about the queue of traffic on the road, we can learn from our past mistakes and perhaps take something forward. I don't know if that's actually the case, what the Air Valley Society is saying. So is it the case that things that should have been done haven't been done around the public space and the public being able to access, seeing as that's all part of this bigger sort of development, which would seem to be, that aspect of it certainly seems to be very good and positive from my perspective. And just one other little thing, and it's probably me and my reading of maps, I always have to look a bit more closely than most people and for a bit longer, which is why I often like to do little site visits actually. But on that map that was shown Tracy, at the very beginning on your presentation, which was excellent. Thank you very much. That was really clear, and you spoke at a very nice pace, far better than I'm speaking now. That was lovely. Thank you. But there was a bit at the front near the river which said informal open space or informal space. And I wondered, did that mean that would never be built on? Is that a bit that's protected, that's always going to be that lovely bit that's wild and wonderful? And so those people that have got their properties in phase 2, there's not going to be a danger that suddenly we've got a 9-storey building being built in front of the river so that someone's got a river view and they can see the egrets or the whatever it is they want to look at, you know. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I'll just go to the open space map if that's possible. Just bear with me. Okay, I think this is the informal access land that you were referring to. It's described as informal access land because this is the county wildlife site where access would need to be very carefully managed in order to protect the biodiversity value of that county wildlife site. All of the open space, the access land, the open space, the informal access land does not form part of the land allocated for development. You know, this land has been identified in order to ensure that development actually secures this open space into perpetuity in terms of its management and its value as part of the green infrastructure of the Yare Valley River Corridor. So no, building within that land is not something that's planned. It's about public access and amenity of this land.
Yeah, if I can just comment in there, I'm not a great fan of saying never in planning terms, but what we can say is just kind of elaborate on what Tracy is saying. Certainly under current policies and the current application, you wouldn't develop on that land. I can't say whether that might change at some point in the future because policies change, but certainly under current policies, you wouldn't actually develop on that piece of land.
And is it the case that what's said in paragraph 65, that what they promised in phase 1 has not yet fully been delivered? Could you confirm, or if you don't know, that's fine, but I'm just curious if you do know. Yeah. I'd like to know the answer.
What I do know is that access to Strawberry Fields was secured as part of phase 1, and that the Yare River Walkway, which improvements are required of, one part of those improvements has been delivered as part of phase 1, and the second part will be delivered as part of phase 2. That's all I'm aware of, so I can't comment any further than that.
And as that becomes a public space, and it's going to be, and it's a beautiful area, that will the city council be keeping tabs on whether they do deliver that, or is it up to somebody to ring up the city council and say, you know, that path that was promised, it hasn't happened? What is the process for that? I'm just curious.
Enforcement at the moment is a reactive process, so it would need a member of the public. We don't have a planning conditions monitoring officer, and our enforcement is carried out by one planning officer. So if it's reactive at the moment, if somebody was to raise an issue with us, we would investigate it, and if we find that somebody hasn't done something in accordance with what they're required to do by condition, our first option is to basically kind of negotiate with them to get them to do it within an acceptable timescale. Obviously, if we can't resolve things by negotiation, we've got the option for serving breach of condition notices. I was trying to find out whilst Tracy was talking whether or not we've actually got any enforcement issues on that site. I can't find any at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say there aren't any. But as I say, I can't find any issues from a planning enforcement point of view at the moment.
Thank you. And I'll just finish by saying I hope with all my heart that some kind of little group gets going in this lovely new development, if it's approved, or even existing development, to monitor those kinds of things. And I think that'd be really good for the health and well-being of the residents there.
Councillor Bergline, you got another question?
Yes, I'd just like to follow up on the information that David and Marcus have given us. So I understand, which is great, that we've secured 14 units of affordable housing there. Now, David indicated that were the block of flats to be lower, we would lose affordable housing. However, it is my understanding that it is the developer's responsibility to include affordable housing in a manner that it obviously forms a planning application that is suitable and is acceptable as a whole. So it is not for us, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it is not for us to try and locate that affordable housing, but it would have to be delivered because we've secured them, and how they deliver it in an acceptable way. It doesn't matter that, so we don't have to come up with plans, or we wouldn't lose this affordable housing, they would have to be located somewhere else. Is that correct?
Well, if I can come back on that, Chair. I mean, there is a demand for affordable flats for this age range, as Tracy has indicated. So if you start reducing the height of the block, then you would start to lose affordable units. As I said earlier on, it's not. If you think the relationship between the two blocks is unacceptable, then regardless of what the tenure is, then you should refuse it. Then if you think it's unacceptable, but you have to weigh everything in the balance, and if you start to reduce the numbers in that block, then you change the nature of the scheme. It may be that when we come back, we're actually looking at a scheme with fewer units on, and we're getting that may well affect the viability. So and we may actually end up with less affordable housing, but that's a different scheme. You need to determine this application on its own merits, but the point in mentioning that this is the affordable blocks is that you need to weigh up the affordable housing that would be delivered if this scheme is proposed against the impact on the existing residents. You don't have to redesign it for the applicant. No, you definitely don't have to do that.
Any more questions, Councillor Stootley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Referring to page 52, paragraph 166, the section 106 obligations, item B there refers to a further viability review. Does this viability review include looking at the final sale prices with a view to a higher contribution if those sale prices are higher than the viability report indicates, please?
The review kind of comes in at a couple of points. So, I mean, at some point we might know. It comes in terms of whether or not a development has started within a certain time. That review obviously can't take into account sale prices, or if it does, it can only take into account a few. A limited number of sales. There's then another trigger if it hasn't been occupied within a specified timescale. But it's, I mean, it takes into account the various variables that can affect viability.
Okay, and just for clarity, can you confirm that if the sales achieved were much higher than the viability assessment indicated, we would be able to increase the contribution, maybe a cash contribution via this Section 106 obligation? And if not, can we put something in there now to ensure that that happens?
I mean, the review it does indicate that any increase in affordable housing would usually be taken as a cash contribution. I think I'm right in saying that. So yeah, if the viability appraisal kind of shows higher levels of profit than were anticipated, or lower costs, or whatever, and which generate a higher profit, then we would seek to take some of that profit in terms of a contribution to affordable housing.
Okay, so is that standard, or does it need to be increased?
That's standard. That's standard.
But can I just be clear for Councillor Stutely, though, that this viability review is only triggered if development doesn't commence within a certain time period or occupied within a certain time period. It is not a review which will definitely take place at some point in the development. It has to be triggered.
Okay, in that case, can we, through the Section 106 system, insist on a review based on the final figures?
No, you can't, is the short answer to that, because we don't have a policy that requires that. The review, the affordable housing policy that we have requires the 2 reviews that we would seek through the Section 106. That's the reason for doing that is that obviously things change, and it's to encourage developers to kind of get things going and bring forward development so that they can effectively benefit from the viability appraisal that was done when the application was approved. It's not a way of skimming what's the right word, of retrieving extra profit. It's a kind of motivation for development rather than actually doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That is a shame.
Yes, we now move on to discussions, but before that, the application is to approve, and I will move that. Have I got a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Move on to discussions. Anyone wish to say any more? No. Councillor Stutely. I've got you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask, maybe Paul could go first, and I'll come back in if that's okay. Thank you.
Paul.
Put me unawares. Okay. Well, having designed and project managed housing development myself, it is possible by design to keep that building, the one that was contentious, but in such a way to accommodate the residents, the developers, and the affordable housing numbers, and just by various means, either plot adjustment, orientation, redesign of the blank gable wall solidities, varying the heights between 2 and 3 stories, and breaking the solidity of the pitched roof, just as a few things. It just need to be rethought and come back with a better proposal. So for that reason, I mean, I think it's because I feel that those residents have been possibly misled into what they were, their expectations. So I think it's only right that it should be refused and just come back with a slightly better plan, and it's not that big a deal.
I've got Councillor Stutely and then Councillor Sands. Then Councillor Burgline.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this developer has an incredible business model. They market their properties at very high prices, add a service charge, ground rents where they're not freeholds, presumably, and I believe all this additional profit should be included in the viability assessment. Having not seen that viability assessment, I don't know whether it has, but just for information, very small one-bed flats are selling for £240,000 here. Two-bed flats are on the market for £320,000 at the moment. And these bungalows, especially the larger ones, will clearly go for more. So I really can't see how viability assessment came up with a 16.4% profit, or potentially less. And bear in mind, of course, that the square meterage of the property with the flats in it is nowhere near 28% of the property. I know it doesn't need to be, but it's worth bearing that in mind. If members are minded to approve this, and they don't consider there is a significant enough loss of amenity to the existing residents in the phase 1 block, I believe there is. But if members are minded to vote in favour of this, then I propose that a condition is placed to ensure this block is built and available for occupation before private units can be occupied, thus providing housing for social rents at the earliest opportunity. As there is already an agreement in place for the provider to sell this, there should be no financial disadvantage to them, perhaps the opposite. I have just one further comment. A unit or units of this type should all have solar panels on them, especially premium products like this. And I believe the developer's only gone for a minimum requirement, and I think that's a real shame.
I'd just like to echo that. When I read that, how developers try to deliberately design to minimize the renewable energy provision to 10%, that just makes me cringe. But that aside, that's not what I was going to say. I think it's really simple. I think in general, this is a good scheme, but that block of flats, the relationship to the other block of flats just doesn't work. And I think it's disappointing. You know, it's 14 units that they were asked to accommodate, and it's really disappointing that they accommodated it in a way that just, you know, that just means the amenity of existing residents is not something I can support. So I think, you know, I'd like to say that in general, I'm supportive of you know, having that type of development at that site and opening up that open space. I think there's lots to like about the development, but it's just that block of flat that doesn't work with the relationship to the already existing block of flat.
Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. Just in support of what Councillor Salmesi said earlier, on this lower part of this kind of like a common land, if you want, for want of a better word, I've often cycled through there on obscure tracks and boardwalks, and that is largely floodplain, and it's overseen by the Air Valley Group, so I doubt if anyone would ever be allowed to build on there. And secondly, I'd like to propose that we have an inclusion, however it's to be worded, that toilet facilities be introduced into the pavilion.
Yeah, I think the applicant indicated that they were going to do that, Mike. She did actually put a chat in, which Jackie read out a bit earlier, that they will put one in.
I'm aware of that, so I think we need to formalise it.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Ian, you had a good already. I'm gonna say something first. I said nothing, and then Councillor Ryan. I believe it's not a bad development. I think the area needs development on there, and the affordable flats. If we start taking these places down, taking stories off, you actually lose how many places you got on the whole site. So you will not get your 14 affordable houses. You actually get less. And then you get people who will not take it over because there ain't that many affordable places there to do it. I also believe that lots of booze. I mean, the booze over the Air Valley must be fantastic. But I'll tell you what, the booze over Mansfield Lane used to be even better. but they're not no more. I mean, you know, where are we looking? I mean, if you come into the city, I mean, some places you'd look near enough straight into next door neighbour's kitchen. So these are a fair way away. They still will have booze. So I believe overall this is not a bad development. I agree with Councillor Stootley with they're probably charging too much money, the bit more firm and everything like that. I agree with all that, but we can't turn that down on planning laws. That's my rant over. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Listen, this is not a perfect development in any way, but once again, as councillors, we have to be pragmatic about these things. And I don't want to risk losing 14 much needed social housing homes for elderly people. They are very important. There's a big shortage of this type of accommodation in Norwich and in Eton. There's also a huge shortage of bungalows in Eton. Now, if you get these 14 homes built, as well as the other homes in development, it frees other accommodation up in the area for younger people and other people moving into the area. And this is very important. As I say, it's not a perfect development, but I don't want to trade off a height between two buildings at the risk of losing these 14 social homes. As far as the amenities are concerned, it's close to Eton Centre, it's near the shops, it's near a cycle lane. The views are very good from where they are. This site was always going to be developed. It might not be perfect, but again, we have to be pragmatic about these things. And that's why I'm fully supporting this proposal.
Councillor Maxwell.
I'm just about what the previous councillor said. We've got a great need for retirement homes or for people who are getting ready to retire and downsize, basically because it's all the baby boomers from the end of the war. There's so many people, and we're going to be really, really difficult to get them all homes soon. So we have to go away, I think, with this. Not happy about the prices. They are expensive, but some people can afford them. And I think we have to go ahead with this development.
Councillor Peake. Got you in. Paul. Can someone unmute Councillor Peake if he don't know what he's doing? Yes,
Right.
you're there now.
Yeah, I live in a 3-storey block of flats, and I'm looking out my window, I see a brick wall. But at least I live in an affordable house, and that's what we need. We can't turn this down just because the view isn't perfect. So I agree with this one.
Thank you, Councillor Stootley, and then Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Reading the virtual room, I would like to therefore add propose that we add a condition that I mentioned earlier to ensure that the affordable housing block is built and available for occupation first before other units can be occupied, so that we get the housing in there as quickly as possible.
Can I have a bit of legal advice on that? Anyone? Planner?
Well, it's not so much legal advice. Excuse me. There obviously is a cost to the developer of building the affordable units, because they build them and then transfer them at little or no cost to the RP. So requiring them to be built first is not normal practice, but certainly we would require them to produce them early on in the development, and that would be part of the section 106 agreement. So we wouldn't need to do it by condition; it would be by agreement.
Councillor Stootley.
Thank you. Well, one of the reasons why the main arguments for voting this through is because of this block, and this block is central to the whole project.
Yes, but you've got to allow the developer to actually build at a rate that will actually allow them to bring the development forward, and requiring them to build the affordable housing first doesn't allow them to kind of take the benefit of some of their market housing and bring forward the development. I mean, we can. It doesn't need to be done by condition. It will be part of the Section 106 agreement, and I think we kind of hear what the committee is saying, but I just don't think it's practical to actually require the affordable housing to be provided before anything else, because then it has to bear the whole cost of all the infrastructure as well, because you've obviously got to get the roads to the development as well. So it needs to be balanced. And it's those upfront costs that affect the viability of the project in the shorter term. So if you're loading all those costs onto the affordable housing, you wouldn't actually get the development built at all. You would need to allow market housing, which would generate a profit, as well as the affordable housing. But I hear the sentiment that's been expressed, but I just don't think it's actually practical to actually load all the access costs onto the affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you. I understand what you're saying, and I don't think this developer is a national developer will struggle to provide this in the short term. Therefore, I would like to still propose this, and unless you consider that by condition you'll ensure this as an early phase.
Well, as I say, I don't think it's not normally done by condition. It needs to be part of the Section 106, because we within the 106 we would say prior to the occupation of X number of dwellings. We haven't got that far in the 106, but you can minute the committee could minute that they wanted it delivered as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's also true that once this planning, if it get approved or not approved, they could actually sell it on to someone else anyway. And so where you're trying to get this development area, that could actually be sold to a local builder.
Well, the condition would still apply, and they
couldn't afford to do it.
That development with planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy with the proposal to add X number of units, as long as those units are not too many.
Yeah,
we'll do that.
Councillor Neil.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed that this development is a very nice development, but the actual sticking point has, from the objections and several councillors, is that particular affordable housing building and what it's doing to the existing residents. I get the feeling that certain councillors are panicking and feeling as if they've got guns to the head, thinking that if we make amendments or just refuse at this point, we'll lose those houses. I think that is totally wrong. I think if we refused it solely because that needs revisiting, that part, with clever design, I cannot see any reason why they cannot, on that same site, build 14 affordable properties. It just needs a little bit more effort. They've done a fantastic job. I love the layout and design. It looks lovely, but it's just that thing needs to have a little bit more thought and revisit. And I don't think that will affect that, because remember, whatever they bring back, we still have to vote it again. And if they don't provide the 14 that they already said, then we would have every right to refuse it again.
Thank you, Councillor Bilgeline.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that refusing this application now, I mean, they get, if I understand it right, they get a free reapplication anyway, so there wouldn't be any additional fees to that. So, that would just be the signal. I think we all made it very clear that we like the development, we don't like the block of flats, and basically it's they get a free retrial on redesigning where they put the affordable housing units. So I would just reiterate, there's no need to panic. They can just redesign this and then come back to us, and we'll be more than happy, I think, if I read the room right, to approve something where the relationship is better managed.
I can't see nothing wrong with a 4-story block, the 3-story block personally. I think it could have been moved somewhere else. That could have been put at the beginning of the site, so that would have took Councillor Stootley's thinking. They could have built it first because they wouldn't have any road infrastructure or anything like that. So that'd been up there to start with, instead of right at the other end. So developers can do this, but if we turn this down, that ain't just they can bring it back in again with another plan. They can appeal against this, and I can't see any reason why we're actually turning this down with the density and the views and stuff like this in other parts of the city. So I believe that this development is a good development. It's for older generation, and I think the spaces are in the houses are better. The only thing I disagree with is how much they're charging for. And what I didn't like in the first phase is they're selling car park spaces off to other people, but they're actually done that different this time. So I believe that'll be a decent development. Right, if no one else wishes to speak, we'll move on to the vote. Councillor Sands.
Are we going to condition the toilets in the pavilion?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. All those in favour of the development, Jackie?
Can we just reiterate what you're voting on, please? You're voting
The
on
original proposal with the extra toilet, and there was another recommendation as well, David.
in relation to the Section 106 agreement and affordable
Oh,
housing.
that yeah. Well, there was the committee makes a note that they want the affordable housing delivered as soon as possible. And also there was the point about the a contribution towards the bus stops and shelters and seats. I think that was it. I think we concluded, the construction management plan needed to refer to construction traffic management as well.
Yeah. Okay, everyone understand? Thank you. All those in favour of the proposal, which is to accept, please show.
Chair, it's a recorded vote, so I'll call your names as I see your hands. So that's Councillor Driver, and please bear with me, please, members. Councillor Sands and Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Peake, Councillor Ryan, Councillor Sarmazy. Okay, that's 4.
All those against, please show.
Those against are Councillors Neal, Councillor Stootley, and Councillor Bogerline.
Thank you
Members,
very much.
have I called all your names out, please?
Yes, I believe
Thank
so.
you very much. So, that is carried.
That is carried. Thank you very much. Can I recommend that we have a 10-minute break and then we come back, if that's okay with everyone?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just 10-minute break, please? And thank you, Carla Fagroni and Carol and Chris Eastwood for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, and can we ask Councillor Lovick to come back in?
And we'll ask Councillor Lovick to come back.
Thank you.
So I'll now leave you. Thank you.
Only taken 2.5 hours to do the first item.
Members, if you could just turn off your videos, please. Thank you.
Sorry?
For the break, just turn off your videos, please. Thank you.
Who? Me?
I don't know who that is, but members, please. Thank you.
I have no idea what she's talking about.
I've just come back in. Is everyone having a break, Marion? I can't hear you.
Judith, hello, it's Jackie.
Yeah,
we're on a break, so please be careful what you say, because it's obviously live streaming for a moment. Thank you.
What time are you back?
We've just started a 10-minute break, so
Back
we're
at
back in a few minutes. Thank you.
25 past. Thank you.
You all right, Jackie? Can't hear you. Yep. No. Yep.
I think so. I think members will be coming back in a moment, Chair.
Yeah.
So just to call members back to the meeting.
Do we let the public back in or not?
Not for this next stage. They can, the public, we have no public for the following items. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
It's
Here we come.
Thank you, Callum.
Can I ask you to start my video, Jackie, please? Thank you.
And Jackie, could you do the same for me, please, too?
Yeah, she's just out of the room at the minute. She's now coming back in. Jackie, could you do
Rogers,
please?
I'm at.
Hey,
Yep.
thank you.
I suppose Sally's gone completely, Jackie?
I believe so, Chair.
Thank you. Do we know if the planners are here or not?
No, the planners are not here just yet.
I'm here, but David's doing the next item.
Apart from Mark.
Oh, Chair, just let you know that I've got to leave at 1:15 to go to work.
Hopefully we'll be finished by then.
Yeah, okay.
Hopefully. Mark, did you say David was doing the next one?
Yeah, he should be, but because if it doesn't, it may be possible for. Well, to be honest, it's fairly straightforward. I could probably do it, or Laris might be here as well.
Okay.
So one of us could run through it if David doesn't reappear in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Hello, David.
We're still waiting for Councillor Sands.
Yes. Here he is.
Oh, here's great.
Okay, we can make a start now, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for a quick break. If we can move on to the applications, we're now going on to 4B, Mayor and Chapman Court, and David's going to take us through the report. Thank you.
I am, so I'm going to share my screen. And just bear with me whilst I get to the right slide. I want to maximize this. So there we go. Okay. This is a variation of condition application for development of student housing at Mary Chapman Court. Some members may remember that we granted planning permission to demolish the existing accommodation, which is still shown on the OS base, which is here, and to construct a building which contained 100 student units and some lecture space and open space in relation to the river. That's what was there. That's all been demolished and has been for quite some time. So the site has been cleared and construction of the approved scheme is underway. Permission was granted for the original scheme subject to a condition 9, which required street trees to be provided along the Duke Street frontage. Following the commencement of works and further investigations about the pavement in front of the site, it's been discovered that basically there's a heck of a lot of services in the area where the street trees would have been planted. So the applicant has come in with a variation of condition, so rather than providing street trees, they are providing 3 trees in planters. This is Duke Street up here, and the application site is back here. The existing newer Duke Street building is in this corner. Actually, is a bit further up here, and originally 3 street trees, roughly in the same position. I mean, you can actually see the service lines here. The trees were basically going to go in on top of the services, and obviously they can't because it would cost too much to reroute the services, and the requirement to kind of keep digging up to maintain would have affected the trees. So this is the wider context of the site. So this is the approved building here, Duke Street. So rather than the 3 street trees, the proposal is to secure 3 trees in planters along the Duke Street frontage, with cycle parking in between, as was previously approved, plus an additional tree within the ownership of Newer up here near their existing Duke Street building. Just for completeness, just to provide the rest of the landscaping scheme, it wraps round onto the riverside with a kind of terrace of steps and trees here, which would then provide a kind of an open area, which is as approved. So there's no change to this. The sole change is, we can go back one, to the street trees along the frontage. It's been referred to Planning Applications Committee because we have had, we've had objections from from members of the public, although those objections actually related to the first scheme that was submitted with the original application, which didn't have any street trees and kind of only had this 1 tree. But that was amended, that wasn't as approved. So the scheme that was approved was actually 3 street trees, no tree here. The proposed amendment is 3 trees in planters and 1 tree located further up on Duke Street. Since the report was published, we've also had representations from Norfolk County Council, because as the Highways Authority, members will know that the agency agreement for the highways function ended, and that function is transferred back to Norfolk County Council. Norfolk County Council has objected to the trees in planters because it's set out in the updates report, but it's a resource issue for them, and they really don't want the trees placed in the highway. However, the update report does indicate that the structures themselves will be the ownership of them will be retained by Newer. The trees will be maintained by Newer, and if there's any need to move the trees in planters, then Newer will move them. They can be moved by forklift. So whilst the concerns of the County Council are noted, they don't relate to highway safety. They relate to a desire not to have to maintain and monitor and license the trees in the planters. We still have a development management policy which encourages the provision of street trees on major developments such as this. So the recommendation is to approve the variation of condition and allow the three street trees in planters plus the additional tree a little further north along Duke Street. Thank you very much. And I will stop sharing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone, any questions on this? Councillor Smazy.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if I missed it, David. I do apologise. That lovely big tree that we can see in outline. Do we know what kind of a tree that's going to be?
It's probably on the plan. Just let me go back to the zoom in on it.
I hope it's not a chestnut.
I don't think it is. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in on the plan. I know Lara is kind of waiting in the wings, who was the case officer, and I don't know whether she knows the answer to that question off the top of her head.
I don't know off the top of my head. I've got a feeling it's a London plane tree, but I'm just checking.
I was hoping to say that, Laura, actually. And the other trees that are in the planters, do we know what they are by any chance? Or what kind of tree, you know, something in the ballpark?
Again, I don't know off the top of my head, but I will check. If people want to carry on with questions, I can come back in a second.
Thank you.
Can I just ask on that about a London pine? I mean, they're fallen trees. Have we put the fallen trees in again now?
London plane, I think you'll find.
Yeah.
Yes, plain.
Yeah. They come from Canada. I mean, they're not our British species, are they? Okay, Councillor, that's another question anyway. Councillor Stutley.
Thank you, Chair. Can you indicate, do you know what kind of cost is associated with each of these planters, please?
I don't know the answer to that question, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, anyone? Okay, we move on.
Councillor.
Sorry. Yeah, it is a plane tree. The big one is a plane tree.
Oh, the two. Sorry, Chair. The two smaller ones, Lara. I think Councillor Smazy also asked about those.
Just finding out. 1 second. It's all in Latin, which is why I'm struggling.
What's saying, Lara? I might recognise what you're saying.
They're beech trees, the little ones.
Thank you.
A type of beech tree that's appropriate for smaller planters that won't sort of outgrow the pots.
Thank you.
Councillor Lubbock. You're still on mute, Councillor. Yep.
If the trees should fail, will they be replanted? Will they be replaced in the same way?
Yes is the answer to that. Yes. There's a standard landscape management condition that if anything fails or dies, I think it's within 5 years of actually being planted, then it should be replaced with something of equivalent value from a landscaping point of view.
And while I'm speaking, I'll just say it's very disappointing to note the County Council's response that they would rather see nothing than even consider these planters, which in fact aren't going to be a burden to them anyway. So if that's the way they treat street trees in Norwich, we've got a pretty grim future, haven't we? Here we are.
Quite agree with you, Councillor Lubbock, on that one. I think most of the members would as well. The recommendation is to approve. I will move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Any discussion, anyone? Councillor Stutley. And then Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Lubbock just made a very good point about the loss of highways to county is going to be to a detriment to the city for a long time to come, I believe. But my point was going to be about the trees. This is unfortunate, and while they don't look quite as good as trees, this might have been an opportunity to put something a bit more interesting in, like the benches known as city trees that are it says here they use vertical installation of moss and can absorb as much as 275 trees in 1% of the space. I've been looking at these for a while, and I think they're an excellent solution. They're probably a bit more expensive than a plant pot, but it would be a good opportunity to insert something like this, and they'd have a use as well. Thank you.
I'm not aware of that product, but if you could send us details of it, we could maybe look at it for the next occasion.
Thank you. I will.
Brilliant. Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to wish Councillor Stutley, first of all, happy 18th birthday. I see the card in the background. But that's levity aside, I think this is an eminently suitable solution. I can remember my own university campus had a whole pile of trees in planters, and that was in the Australian climate, and they were very, very successful. I might add they were citrus trees, which was really useful for us students when fruit ripened. But I think this is an absolutely excellent solution to what would have been an insurmountable problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, we'll move on to the bill. All those in favour of recommendation to approve, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to 4C. It's the land at Darling Road, Taylor Lane and Douglas Close. And David, you take it or Mark?
I'm going to take you through this one, Chair.
Mark's going to take you through this. Thank you.
So there's a fairly long history to this site, which I'll summarise. But essentially, outline consent was originally granted, I believe, in 2007 for 51 dwellings on the site. Actually, I need to share the share the presentation. Just bear with me.
We had a site visit then, didn't we? Before that.
Yeah, I think they might have even had a couple of site visits to this over the years. Sorry, bear with me. I'm just put the presentation onto the. Still got on Bartram Mowers at the moment. Right, okay.
David, can you put it up?
No, it's all right, I'm there.
No, you're there.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep, okay, good. Yeah, so consent was granted for 51 dwellings. Now, the new dwellings have been constructed and reserved matters consent was granted in 2011, and a separate revised reserved matters was granted in 2012. So the new house is it's an old sort of RAF officers site. Some members may well know it, certainly if you were on committee when we visited the site previously, but essentially Dowding Road is a long road that runs from Pfeiffer's Lane up here. This area of housing immediately on the left now, this area here and this area here are the new dwellings. Some of these around Embury Crescent sort of former RAF houses, as are these ones. So the new housing consisted of this area here. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yep. This area here, and then a collection of new dwellings up the top here. So at the time of the sort of outline application, the land was all in one ownership, and just to paint a bit of context, I think David Wilson Homes bought some of the site from the previous landowners, but not all of it, and that caused a few issues in terms of David Wilson Homes not having some of the open space, and indeed I think David Wilson Homes had to then buy further land from the previous owner to enable them to, so literally just bought the area where the houses were and didn't think about areas they'd need for other open space to support things like surface source drainage and the play area. So there's a play area up here, and there's some areas which were bought to support areas needed for surface source drainage, but the areas of open space around the access road, this large triangular area here, and this area here of open space were all retained by the former landowner. Now, to cut a long story short, that the Reserve Matters application that led us to have 2 different management plans for the site. It was quite a lengthy process, and the sort of former landowners legal team got involved, but essentially you've now got 2 different management plans for the site, one relating to the land which was purchased by David Wilson Homes, and that's managed by a residents management association that deal with that land, and then the retained land from the former landowner, which is managed under a separate management plan. Now, over a number of years, we've had a number of complaints about how well kept the land that's retained by the former landowner is, and we've sought to respond to that. We've sought to try and informally get some improvements. Breach of condition notice was served at one point, and there was some improvement after that. But we sort of informally get some improvement to that areas. But one area of contention with some local residents has been areas of wildflower meadows. So this plan shows in blue areas that were intended to be planted up with wildflower under the original landscape scheme. We've had complaints that some of those wildflower areas have been overtaken by weeds and haven't been maintained properly. As you'll see from some of these photos, so the wildflower areas sort of vary in size. So the proposals before you today is essentially to remove some of the wildflower areas and allow them to be essentially mowed to grass to assist with the management of those areas. The application is sort of a response to some of the concerns raised by residents, but it's officers' view that the current state of the site, irrespective of whether the wildflower areas are left, is not in a state where we could take enforcement action, albeit we still get complaints about it. So this is near the access point of Dowding Road to Pfeiffer's Lane. This shows the largest wildflower area in the centre of the screen. It's just looking back the other way towards Pfeiffer's Lane, showing the largest wildflower area. So these photos were taken in September. This is further up Dowding Road. This is a photo taken back in May, and this area was meant to be one of the wildflower areas. It's sort of lacking wildflowers at that point in time when you'd expect it in May to have them. So that was back in May. They have in fact mown these sort of areas now. So they've done what they're asking for consent for already. So members may need to bear that in mind. But I'd point out that one of the management issues with some of these small strips is that you can see they're attempting to mow around them and then maintain a very small strip. So I think it's officers' view that perhaps larger areas of wildflower would have more chance of success. So that's that. So as it is in September, that's again as it is in September. So although we get complaints about the sort of maintenance of the land, our view is that as we visited it in September at least, that the site was in an appropriate state, albeit not completely in accordance with the management plan. This is the sort of second largest area of wildflower, which is at the junction with Taylor's Lane. I believe that area is, yeah, that's still there, so that's September. This is another area which was meant to be wildflower. That's taken, that's an older photo, and I believe that's it now. And Embry Crescent, so there was the plans always showed wildflower in this central area here, but there's never actually been any wildflower planting in that location. And it's been left as you see it there. So essentially, the application is to remove all of the wildflower areas other than the largest one on the junction of Dowding Road, to try and improve the maintenance and sort of remove some of the complaints we've got from residents, and essentially have it as it's shown, as it already is on the 10th of September here. So these strips of wildflower up the main road are no longer there. There's proposed to remove this one and mow that, but that hasn't been mown to grass yet, and this one has already, as you can see there, been done. So the recommendation is to approve the application. And I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Mark. If you could put us back on widescreen, please. Thank you. Questions? I've got Councillor Bergline, Councillor Lubbock next.
I'm going to go on about how unacceptable I think that is later on. But my question is, given that that was in their management plan and that was what was agreed, and I understand that you were trying to take a diplomatic approach because we want to avoid further complaints from residents because it hasn't been maintained properly. Can we get a condition where we ask them for some sort of compensation that can be put into somewhere else where we can actually try and get a biodiversity net gain, because that's what it was trying to achieve. So for them to just, you know, be able to get it removed without having to put, I don't know, money into a wildflower verges that the council maintains properly, can we get something like that?
Councillor Lubbock. You're on mute, Judith.
In the report on page 80, under representations, there's a comment about 5 mature flowering cherry trees needed to be cut down over the last 3 years, and nothing has been done to replace any of them, leaving ugly stumps. And the response is, trees protected by TPO have been removed with permission, and the TPO regulation require replacement planting. This can be enforced separately to this application. Well, is it not an opportunity now to include that in this application? I mean, one doesn't have much confidence that they're actually going to do even the basics if they can't replace TPOs that have had to come down.
Mark, did you want to come back on those 2 items?
I mean, I guess the reason it's not in this application is because it doesn't need to be in this application. There's no proposal there that we need to approve as a planning authority. The cherry trees died, and there's a requirement where they're TPO to replace them. So the TPO regulations are a better sort of way of us essentially of enforcing that. And I think there has been dialogue between the tree officer and the owner to seek that replacement. But it doesn't need to be part of this application for us to have any further powers over them. Essentially, it doesn't.
Can I ask Mark about the wildflowers? I know we planted wildflowers on St Stephen's roundabout, which looked fantastic for the first couple of years, and then the next year they wasn't that good. And I understand they have to be changed every so many years. You have to take all the soil out and everything to change it, and then probably do it all again, which is a lot of money. But that's down to the county now anyway. But how long these wildflowers been in? Have they just been in since we done the planning application, or were they in before? So, I mean, what I'm trying to get to is it about time they were changed, or did no one look after them at all, and that's why they died off?
I think essentially for them to thrive, they needed greater maintenance. But I don't think it helps that a couple of the areas were extremely small. Literally tiny strips. There's provision in the management plan to require a level of maintenance. I don't know. Maria is online. She may have an idea of when they were planted.
Maria, are you about? There she is.
Sorry. No, I believe they were implemented as part of the original development. So it will have been since approval was given for reserve matters in 2011. I'm not sure of the exact date, but it's been within that time frame.
So 2011.
It's more recent than that, certainly.
Okay.
Because that was when they were looking at first construction. But
okay. Is there any more questions? Okay, we'll move on to discussion.
Councillor, nobody's responded to Councillor Bergline's point.
Councillor Bergline, that was
Do you want me to make the point again? I was just wondering whether we can ask for some form of compensation for them to pay into our maintenance or into, you know, some form of, well, I would feel really uncomfortable by just letting them getting away with it. I understand that we need to be pragmatic so this doesn't look like a dump site, but is there something we can ask them to do instead of it, or we can ask them to pay into instead of it?
I mean, the answer to that is potentially, in principle, you could do. I think we need to understand what members' views are on the proposal. I think so. I think essentially you need to go back to the original scheme and consider whether this is whether the loss of these would have made that unacceptable at the time. And obviously there's different elements of the wildflower sides of the landscape, and really, you know, this is not necessarily, this has come about really to try and get away, you know, as you acknowledged, is try and get a sort of pragmatic way forward in terms of trying to get better management and alleviate the sort of complaints from residents. Having said that, like I say, I don't think that some of those wildflower areas have been kept in such a manner that would have deserved certainly the limited enforcement resource that we've got. I mean, so we've had complaints when there's a limited amount of weeds in the wildflower areas, which in the grand scheme of the enforcement resource and enforcement issues we've got is not the biggest consideration. It's unfortunate they've removed them already during the course of this application. But yeah, I mean, clearly any commuted sum would have to be proportionate to the areas of wildflower they're removing as well.
Thank you. No more questions. We'll move on. I'll move the proposal is to to enforce or to agree. To agree.
To agree with variation to the management plan to allow some wildflower areas to be removed from the management.
I'll move that. Have we got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Discussion, anyone? Councillor Sands, and then Councillor Neal, and then Councillor Lubbock.
Thank you, Chair. In Beaufort, the southern car park, we have an area there which is regularly every year is left to grow out for wildflowers and other sorts of things, because I understand there are some rare orchids there and also provides habitat for insects and other things. And also in Beaufort Pool Park, we have some reasonably large swathes there which are left to grow out over spring and summer. They've only just been cut back, but they will be allowed to grow again next year. I don't think we should be agreeing to removing these wildflower areas. They provide a haven for all sorts of insects and seed stock as well for small rodents, voles and things. And I think it's a retrograde step to allow these wild flower areas to be removed. I think they should be enforced and kept in place.
Councillor Bergelein was that next, and then Councillor Lubbock. No? That's it, Councillor Neal first.
Yeah, I echo what Mike Sanders said. I'm astounded that we're sitting here deciding to reduce biodiversity where we should be sitting here trying to decide to increase biodiversity. It's just, I'm lost for words.
Councillor Lubbock.
And
sorry.
Yeah, and I just think we're just trying to do this as a matter of convenience rather than find the right solution. Sorry.
That's all right. Councillor Lubbock.
Yes, I agree with the last two speakers. I think I'm not prepared to see the loss of biodiversity and visual amenity. And if you look at the management plan, you see that it is quite a complex series of measures they have to take each year. It's not simple, but we actually, that was what was agreed, and they agreed it. And I think that we can't let them get away with this, because if they did take time and effort over it, and money, of course, with somebody who knew what they were doing, it could be done. But it does take a lot of management. They've had the success that they wanted of building these properties, and now they have to do the maintenance. But I say I'm a bit concerned that they will do it, because they haven't even replaced those trees in the last 5 years. I mean, at what stage could we consider taking enforcement action? It's pretty obvious they haven't done what they said they would. Plus the fact that they haven't replaced these trees. At what stage would we feel that we could be successful with an enforcement procedure?
Can I just ask, Mark, these open spaces are different, owned by a different person to what the buildings are, isn't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so to take the enforcement action, I'm not sure how we would do that. You know, what we
these spaces are owned by a different company. They're not owned by David Wilson Homes, who built the homes. The David Wilson Homes, despite these areas being within the original planning application, David Wilson Homes never purchased these areas from.
They were looked after by Norwich North, yeah?
I think Norwich North have very recently taken over. No, not Norwich North, just North. I think they've just. Maria, can you just? I think they've recently taken over, but I believe the landowners appointed them to take over the management, haven't they?
North have been managing the site as the contractor for a number of years. There has been talk about changing the contractor more recently, but that hasn't been implemented yet.
Okay, thank you. I've got 3 more speakers. Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Stootley, and there was someone else. Councillor Smays, yes, it? Jane. Marion?
Yeah, I agree. We really need to get them to take up their responsibilities. Since I've been working with Mousehole Heath, I've realised that keeping wildflowers around, it's a very delicate subject. It's also quite difficult. And they obviously didn't know this when they took it on, or thought they knew it. And I think they should call them in and make sure that they do their job that they're employed for.
Councillor Stootley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with other speakers so far. I think we do have to ensure that this is enforced. My concern would be that if we don't, then other developers and landowners with these conditions in place will start looking at what they can reduce in terms of their costs, and we don't want to go down that road. That would be wrong. So I'm going to vote against this, and I think we should have full enforcement. Thank you.
Councillor Smazy.
Very similar to other speakers, and I just think it chimes a bit with this earlier application that we heard, where some things that had been promised hadn't really been delivered, and what we're going to do about it. And I just agree really that if we don't put our foot down in some way, then really we're not going to we are sending out a wrong message. And I am worried about those cherry trees. I noticed that as well, and I want some cherry trees put back, or something that replaces those, please.
Yeah, I'm going to say something. I agree with what every councillor has actually said. I mean, I'm Chair of Norwich and Bloom, and if you look at those areas, I mean, there's a lot more could have been done with those areas, and not just a little bit of wildflower. They could have done the whole thing in wildflower, or even done something even better than that. I mean, they should be getting in touch with the residents around here to see if the residents will actually take over and actually look after these places. And with help from people like Norwich and Bloom, or a company giving the residents some money to actually do something there, I think it would be a much better idea. So I think we do want to put pressure on the person who owns the land there to actually put these back into the original state, or to improve them, because I'm not a great fan of just having a little bit of up the middle of a grass bank. That looked ridiculous once they done that. Councillor Stootley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you make an excellent point there. The community involvement is something that could really work, and it does work in other wards. Certainly in my ward, we have community in various places.
Is there anyone else? Mark, did you want to come back before we take a vote on what enforcement we could take? I mean,
Well,
Yeah, I haven't quite finished.
Okay, Councillor Stutely.
Apologies, I hadn't quite finished. The landowner here has the option, if it's too expensive to maintain it, to hand it over to the community to look after themselves.
Mark.
Yeah, the Council noted, you know, this was really an application where we were just trying to, you know, work towards a solution, but the members' sort of thoughts are noted on it. I think one of the difficulties with this, to be frank, from an officer's point of view, is the amount of time and resource this is taken up in the context of wider, you know, enforcement matters we've got going on now. We have served an enforcement notice previously. And I think the wildflowers were replanted after that, and that was going back a couple of years ago now. And certainly officers' views were that there was, you know, they'd complied with that notice to a sufficient extent that we couldn't take further action against them. So if you served an enforcement notice, your only next point of call, as you like, is if you believe they have failed in complying with that notice, is to prosecute them, and that's not a cheap or straightforward option. Now, our view was despite us considering they'd complied with our notice, to the extent that we couldn't reasonably take further action, i.e. prosecuting them, we still had complaints from residents, essentially. But I think from our point of view, it's getting that balance between, you know, the reality is of local government at the moment, we have to focus our resources on certain things. So I appreciate there's lots of things we'd like to do, and we can, if members refuses today, we can certainly require the wildflower areas to be those that they have mown to be replanted. But I think that can, you know, some of the expectations have been such that we have to sort of focus our resource, so to speak. Yeah, so that's the context.
Could it be recommended that to save them money, they get rid of the land and give it to the public, if you know what I mean?
I guess it's something we could explore. Yeah.
Could it be given to maybe, I don't know, could Kate Price's team be involved and get a fund to set up a community group to, I don't know, something like that? I think the sentiment is we don't want them to just get away with not doing it.
Yeah. Councillor Sands.
I cannot vote in favour of this, but what I would say is, if not reseeding with wildflowers, certainly allowed to go over to meadow grass, which includes wildflowers. Then there's a subtle difference there, and perhaps consult with the wardens and other people who look after Moushold Heath in terms of, you know, what can be done. I'm certain we can. They can give a viewpoint as to how that can be managed, and then that advice passed on to the landowners, builders, developers, or whatever they are called. And I think that would be a suitable alternative.
If we turn this down, they have to put wildflowers in. Is that correct? To put it back how it was.
Well, if you turn it down, then we've got to decide what we do in terms of enforcement action based on the current state of the site and currently where, you know, what the situation is. So currently there you've got 2 areas of wildflower meadow existing, and you've got some small strips which have already been removed. So that, I think, so there needs to be 2 decisions if you turn it down. There needs to be one decision on, obviously, on the recommendation for you today, and the next decision is on what you're asking us to do in terms of enforcement action. I mean, I hear what you're saying. My concern is that the reality is that lots of these things are nice to do, but actually take quite a bit of resource. And, you know, we haven't got a endless resource in Norwich City Council to hold developers' hands in terms of telling them how they need to manage their landscape. So the enforcement option, I think, in reality, will be serving a further notice on them, requiring wildflower areas to be planted and for compliance with with the notice. We could discuss potentially with the developer whether there's an option to transfer land to residents, but I'm somewhat doubtful that that would, from my knowledge of discussions in the past, and there's a real reluctance from nearby residents, I believe, to take on any further cost of management of open spaces from the discussions we've had with some residents. I feel uncertain from the discussions I've had with residents and developer that that would likely happen.
Okay, hang on. Councillor Neil, you indicated.
Yeah, it's actually a question, not a comment. It's just by what Mark's been saying. This is owned by somebody separate from the building development, but you said that Norse have been contracted to cut this. Do we know whether this mowing, the pun is intended, mowing over all this is down to the contractor or down to the owner? And, you know, where is it coming from? Is it Norse trying to save money as normal, or is it the landowner instructing the Norse's contractor to mow that down?
I think they're trying to make it look respectable, and with that wildflower in the middle all rotted and no good, that was the easiest solution, is to cut it away.
Let's hope this doesn't happen if that was Norwich Services Limited.
The answer is I don't know the answer to that question, in short. But yeah.
Okay, I need a recommendation to move forward. I look like we're going to turn this down. Jackie?
Chair, I just want to point out that you have already moved the recommendations as set out in the report.
Yeah. If
you wanted to move an alternative, you and the Vice Chair would need to withdraw that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I will withdraw it because I don't think that would work. Councillor Maxwell, agreed, to withdraw as well. We need another recommendation now. If we just go against this plan, vote against this recommendation, you're saying we can't do a lot, Mark, yeah?
No, that's not what I said. I think you've just got to make a decision as to what enforcement you do take. You know, you could, so and there's quite a number of different options.
I've got Councillor Sands, Councillor Stootley. Yeah, go on, carry on, Mark.
There's quite a number of different options in terms of what you could do in terms of enforcement. There's two larger areas of wildflower still exist. So one option could simply be to require them to manage those two areas. You could ask them to replant the strips that have been lost, and yeah, within a certain time period. We'd take advice from our landscape colleagues in terms of what time period that would be, but it would be a further notice. But they're sort of a couple of options you've got.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I've got Councillor Sands, Councillor Stootley, Councillor Neil. Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd like to propose probably a three-part proposal. First of all, that they reinstate the trees that were lost, either with the same trees or with similar trees, suitable trees. Secondly, that they are required to replant the wildflowers. And thirdly, in the long term, they come up with a proposal to maintain and develop this either as a wildflower reserve or as a mixed meadowgrass and wildflower reserve. And I think that would be quite sustainable. It is elsewhere, and I cannot see that it would not be sustainable here.
Mark, could you just come back before I ask for a second for that?
Yes, you can't. One thing you can't do is enforce something that's beyond what we've already got secured. So your third proposal to turn it all into, you know, you can't basically go beyond what we can't enforce or require them to do anything beyond what we've already got in the previous management plan.
To explore, not to enforce. I think there's a subtle difference there.
Mark?
Okay, that's noted, but I think the sort of comments on planning authority resource is perhaps falling on deaf ears here, and that I think there's a complete lack of reality over the sort of number. You've got to in all enforcement cases, the council's going to have to make some very difficult decisions on how much harm things cause and what we enforce against and what we don't. We currently have around about 220 enforcement cases and one officer to deal with them. That's the reality of resourcing at the moment. And you will all know from local government resources that we haven't got anywhere to suddenly magic up income to pay further resourcing. So, and I don't say that to be difficult. I just simply say that to add a bit of reality to the conversation, really. So that's the sort of situation we are in.
Okay, I've got you, Councillor Bergelein, but I've got Councillor Stootley first, then Councillor Neil, Councillor Bergelein. And we still ain't got a proposal on the table yet, if anyone want to make one. Yes, I'll come to you in a minute, Paul.
I did make the proposal, Chair.
But you put the third one in, and that was something we couldn't do it by law, wasn't?
Well, then we can withdraw the third part of that proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. That sounds not a bad idea. Did anyone want to second that proposal? No. So we'll move on for another proposal. Councillor Stootley.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got no objections to Councillor Sand's proposal. I was going to suggest that, or ask Mark if it would be less time-consuming for officers if we added in a option to provide a commuted sum instead as part of the enforcement notice. And if anybody would like to propose that, I'd gladly second it. I believe Councillor Bergelein started with that one.
Mark?
So I think the first thing you need to decide and vote on is the application. I wonder if a lot of this discussion on what we do in terms of enforcement ought to happen after you've voted on the applications before you today, because a lot of potentially you should just see this through in more detail. Potentially, because we have delegated us to take enforcement action, really you just need to sort of give us a steer as a committee as to what you want us to explore and do. And so that could do, we could have a number of discussions with the applicant. That could be.
Yep. Okay, that seems a good way forward to me, Mark. I will move that we eject this. Have I got a seconder for that? And then we can go into enforcement action afterwards. Thank you. No one want to speak on that? Can we just move it? All those in favour of ejection, please show. That's unanimous.
Can I just clarify the reasons for refusing the application, which I believe is basically is along the lines of the loss of ecological enhancements to the site.
Yes, completely. Yeah, and that maintenance, everything. Well, they're not actually done their maintenance program, have they?
It's fine. We'll pull together something.
Yeah. Councillor Neil, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just trying to be a bit pragmatic and come up with a solution, and maybe we should go back to them and insist that they keep the same volume of wildflower area, but give them a choice of putting it in a more convenient place for their maintenance vehicles. So possibly taking it out of that strip, but they're going to have to put that amount of square meterage back on the site as a whole, so we don't lose any of the biodiversity. We might just be moving it.
Thank you. Can I just tell Jake that Councillor Peake has left the meeting? He's gone to work. I see just now. He did give his apologies that he was gone. Councillor Bergelein?
We can't hear.
Chair, was he there when you took the vote? Sorry.
Yeah, he was there when we took the vote and left straight after.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe Mark can comment on whether that is possible or whether we can be confident that they maintain the area in one piece, as Councillor Neil has suggested. Alternatively, I think it would also be an option, as Councillor Stootley said, to require a sum of what they would normally pay for the maintenance and then put it into a project, you know, a community project that, I don't know, looks after wildlife in a park or something like that, where we can actually be confident that there will be a biodiversity net gain from it, rather than than kind of gambling on that they'll do their job. So I'll be happy with both of them, and kind of depending on what Mark thinks is more doable.
Mark, did you get the steer on what the committee want?
Yeah, I think I've got the steer. I'm just thinking through the mechanisms of doing it, but essentially, I think if we serve a notice, it's going to have to be, thinking of Tom, I think it's going to have to be. We can't really do anything other than just requiring them to comply with the main management and maintenance plan we've got.
Okay.
What we'll do before we take that route, we'll explore with the landowner, or attempt to explore with the landowner, whether they would wish to consider another option, which could be to replace those areas of wildflower they removed, so we have the same area, but perhaps it might be easiest for them if that's in one place. So there's areas they could do that. For example, on the corner of Taylor's Lane, there's so rather than strips, you have it all
good
in one
idea.
area. Or a commuted sum. I think then we may have to. It may be that another application comes back with a different management plan, if that were the case, so that can be regularised. That alternative option.
Okay, that's a good way forward to me. Do committee agree with that? Yeah, I see all nods everywhere. Councillor Samaisi, did you want to say something?
I just didn't know if we got an answer to this, or could we ask the question: is this failure in the management plan to do with the person who owns the land, or the people that are actually just doing? I can imagine the guys, and it probably is guys from North, turning up and thinking, oh, just mow it down or something. Do you know what I mean? And is there a communication breakdown, and maybe we could drill down a little bit into that? I know there's a resource implication, Mark. I'll make the phone calls if you want me to, but I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's the landowner or the management. But one thing I would say is that I think they've only been Maria may want to come in here, but I believe they've only been removed in this summer, haven't they, Maria?
Yes, there were certainly more wildflowers last summer and the year before that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think they broadly were. I think probably last summer the wildflowers were there and looked okay. They might have had a few weeds which upset some of the residents, but
okay,
only there.
Neil, I'll take you, then we'll finish the meeting.
Yeah, if experience from my own ward and the history goes before them, they do have a record of stripping everything out and making life easy. So it's might be worth.
Well, can I just say, in Lakeland, where the daffodils come up, they do actually go round them, and they go long until they die, then they take them out. So North do look after a lot of places, Neil, especially around near yours, just up the road on Hall Road.
Yeah, so, but they look after Lakeland.
Yes, I know. Thank you. Can I thank everyone for turning up? I think that's the end of the meeting. And Councillor Sands, did you want to just come back? Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, one tiny little thing, just reference back to the very first item. They mentioned hibernaculum or hibernaculate in there. I don't know whether developers know something we don't know.
We've completed the meeting now, and I think we're still live. So I think
it's all right. Yeah. This is only a bit of light-hearted stuff, nothing serious.
Yeah, I think that's
we're still live, Mike.
Okay, well, if you want to cut off the, I don't think it's anything embarrassing.
Go on in.
Hibernacula is defined as a place in which a creature seeks refuge, such as a bear. And I don't know whether developers know anything about the wildlife around there that we don't know. That's all I was going to say.
Perhaps Judith can tell us if there's any bears in Eton. Thank you. Can I thank everyone for coming to the meeting, and we'll see you in the next meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers, Shaggy. Cheers, Mark. Cheers, Dave. Ian. Cheers, Shaggy.
Callum.